Let's call the meeting to order. Today's January 16th, 2024. It's 7:05 p.m. And we will start with a roll call for those present, and then Brent. If you could also say you're participating remotely, that would be great.
Peter Michelson present.
Ted Carter present.
Ed Bozella present.
Steve Callahan present.
Bob Stein present.
Emily McCabe present. Jill Rafter present.
Pete Salvino present.
Okay, and Brent.
Brent Nelson, Brit's being remotely, can't seem to turn on my camera.
Okay, that's okay. We can hear you. All right, great. Tonight we have the agenda that we sent around to everybody. The first item on the agenda is comments from our town moderator, Mr. McDermott. I guess they want us, the speakers, to speak at the podium.
Oh, at the podium?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
That's
My last opportunity.
As unaccustomed as you are.
As uncomfortable as it makes me, I will. So, hey, thanks for hosting me, and I'll only take a couple of minutes. I know you guys have a busy agenda as usual. Since I kind of made my decision in the fall, and the announcement, I've been eager to get before this group, and largely just to be able to thank you, for your service, and then thank you kind of on behalf of the 40 others of you who are not here, who were former members of the Warrant Committee that I appointed as well over the 21 years. And the service has been great. And just to kind of reassure, these are my sentiments, but this is how I really feel, that this is really vital service, and and really important for the town. And all these things, what I call collaborative engagement, your deliberations, the open dialogue you have, these are really important. And it is, as the committee, the one committee of our legislature. And I know, Bob, you and I talk about this. I mean, we have a legislative body, which I'm going to defend in a minute, because I think it's really pretty cool. But that you are the committee that is making recommendations to them. And it's, for the town, beyond the considerations of the budget, it's very, very important. And it continues a heritage that goes on, way back into history that I think we have to appreciate. I was talking to Richard DeSorger, and I said, there's been 372 annual town meetings in Medfield, which is really a phenomenal number, considering we're only coming to what the 270 fifth anniversary, and I said, so I moderated 21, which is only 5.6%, and it's going to get lower every year. So it's really, it keeps you humble, over time for Medfield. But one of the things I want to say about the Warrant Committee is that, I appreciate the way it's now operating. Things are being done better than ever, in Medfield, going back to the late 90s, and then, this presentation of the budget and all of that. So, not only have you been doing it a long time as a committee, as a group, but today the attention to it, I think is really better than ever. So I just wanted to reinforce that. People would ask me, what does the moderator do? And I always said there were three things that the moderator does. And, everybody sees the orchestration of the town meeting and the moderating of the town meeting. But I would always lean in on the appointment of the Warrant Committee, because I think it is such a unique committee. And so that's a really, really important function that somehow in our charter was given, completely to the moderator to serve a long time. You get to appoint the board for a long time. And it was something that I always respected, and I really appreciated as a part of the role. And so I just want to kind of thank you guys for that. And then finally, though, the third thing is going to be important going forward, which I would always say is to help to set a tone. And I think the Warrant Committee as well does that. That's really, really important. I think it's going to be particularly important this year and going forward, to try to set a tone, and a positive tone, but one, that is all about the essence of what we do. Finally, I just really wanted to I'm about people and process. I call it the DNA, but from a people perspective, all of the great people that I've met, that if I'm speaking to the town, I don't know if Owl is getting me, but we've had extraordinary people who do so much. And, I have a list of, just of the nonprofit organizations or the non-governmental organizations in town, the volunteers and the people that make all of that happen, together with the people that work on our for the town and our professional staff. And then, I always throw kudos because I've only worked under 2 town administrators, with Mike and Christine. And, I've become, was very friendly with each of them, but have the highest amount of respect. And that's been extraordinary as well. Integrity, hard work, caring, knowledge, skill sets. So that's been great. And the process is something I really love. Every year we frame up a warrant. There's a certain predictability to it for our legislature. We're in the part of that process that we're in now, in which it comes at a date certain, so we know we're going to do this on the first Monday of May. Every year that's really important. That kind of consistency, people can plan for it when the legislature convenes. We get the recommendations from you folks. And then we go through a process where we discuss, we debate, we decide. And it all happens in one night. Sometimes it's been as many as 46 articles. And so it's a lot of business being done. And so that process, that element, some people only see the part of it that happens at town meeting. You guys see it from beginning to end. But that whole thing, I think, is really special. And I also think it's very efficient way to be able to make laws, which is what a legislature does, to pass budgets, which is what a legislature does. That's real serious stuff on the local level. And it has to do with the things that we do well in Medfield and we want to continue to do. And that's weaving together what I would call the fabric of the community, because we're dealing with the schools and public safety, our senior citizens, our local commerce, all of this. It's great. So finally, I think I probably said that a couple of times, but this is about, to me, democratic participatory self-government. That's what you're participating in. That is a really powerful notion. If you take what Lincoln said, in his Gettysburg Address, government by the people for the people. And this is what we do, in our town meeting, and we see it play out. I would call it the purest form of democracy, and others who are friends of mine would call it the purest, most anachronistic form of democracy, or whatever, something like that. But it continues. So that's all I really have to say. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy to say that I still have a lot of energy. I'm not burnt out in the slightest by this. I love doing it. It was an honor and a privilege, and. I used to joke with Christine. You're trying to avoid this. You see this photo of this is in Medfield. And I said, it was like there was always that little piece there. It was like as we went into this, and that kind of made it a little bit more daring and in some ways more fun. I'm very animated by things going on in town, so I'm going to be around and about elementary education. I'd be a hypocrite if it wasn't the case. Years and years ago, I was sitting in Millis as a young professor, and I had a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and we came to Medfield. And a lot of that decision was where do we want to raise our kids, but where do we want to educate their kids? And so that matters to me. The downtown, the possibilities, the continuing possibilities for what that brings to us. Our open space is phenomenal. And I've got more and more opportunity this fall to be able to go out to all of these places. Our history is something that I think is very special. And then finally, this idea of what is community? What in our volunteers? How do we promote that? How do we perpetuate that? All of these things that happen. That I think it's the differentiator for Medfield. I think it is our distinctive advantage over. I could go around, I could name other towns and tell you why it is, but the things that we do, from Medfield Day to, all other kinds of activities that happen in this town because of people who, commit to it and believe in community like I did, which is like, this is a better place to be. It's a better place to raise your family. It's a better place to walk at night. It's a better place, whatever you decide to do. If, this commitment to community, this fabric of the community, all of these things that we do, continue to make it a great place. So I'm around. I just finally, again, always for the rest of my term, which goes to almost the end of March. Certainly, if there's anything that I can do or clarify, and then following that forever, I'd be interested in talking to anybody, and anybody who's out there as well about, town issues and matters if they think that I can bring any kind of a perspective or insight to it. So that's all I want to say. Really appreciate the Warrant Committee, appreciate the work. Good luck here in the spring. I'm kind of following a little bit more from a distance than usual, but I know that we have a kind of a robust agenda taking shape. I appreciate all the work you do.
Well, since I've been on, since I've been on this for 6 years, been here the longest, I just want to thank you for all that you've done. And I really, when you look at the things, and I think Richard DeSoga's piece, and I was looking at that and checking off some of the things that I've been, so 6 of you, 21, but when you talk about the hospital, you talk about the schools, going through that pandemic. So your leadership behind the scenes, and, people see you on the dais once a year, but those of us who have worked with you and have seen it and behind it, and the thing I've said to people, and I would say to you, and I really, as going forward, you've never inserted your ego or an ego into this. You really maintained the town's best interest and in a democratic process. And knowing from personal experience in my 6 years, that's not easy to do. Probably haven't been able to do my own self. But I give you a lot of credit for that, and it's a testimony to yourself and the work you've done, and it's greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks.
And I would just, echo what Bob said, and clearly that article that Richard wrote was outstanding. I know the town will have some type of appreciation event for you.
Oh.
And we'll do it properly. So what your record of service is exceptional.
Well, thank you.
I don't think it can be.
I'm going to discourage, anything this is a continuation element, but I appreciate it. I mean, that's Richard's article was a complete surprise to me, so you come home and you open up the Hometown Weekly as kind of is my habit. And there it is. So that was crazy. And
I know they want to celebrate you the right way at the right time.
Oh, thank you.
I think they will do that, and we'll be a part of that. And I think I'll just share one story with the Warrant Committee that Scott shared with me over coffee. He said, I said, I can't imagine a town meeting without Scott McDermott as the moderator. 21 years is a long time. And he said, well, the thing I'm, probably the most proud of is that I didn't make an enemy in 21 years. So that's quite a talent, because what he had to do. So.
I might be a little less friendly with some people. I don't know. So there's a question of definition about that, but I'm such a believer in what can be done by common purpose. I don't care in my professional life. It's about companies. It's about small businesses, and when people kind of get and when you can get the power of a town thinking in that in that fashion. It's exceptionally powerful, and that's to me, it's kind of what made Medfield. All of us, we've been talking about this for a long time, Bob, our kids, and all that, and it's just as very, and I think it's very special. I would start that letter and I said, we have a special place to call our home, and I don't have any of all the kind of the decisions that I was going to say that I made or serendipitously happened to me. To be here in Medfield and, for our family and for the people that I've met and for the good times that I've had, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, it's so, to me, it's about, how do we continue to perpetuate that? Generations change and turn over. And, I was the younger generation where I first went on Park and Rec. That was there was a transitional thing going on. They were looking for people to get engaged and, involved at that point in the 90s, because there was another whole generation, that had, been the hallmark, had really been the foundation of of the town before that. And so it happens again. It's kind of good for the town, and we just need to keep the continuity and make it go up and to the right, you know, up in the, and so anything that I can do to contribute to that going forward, so. I'm sure you'll be seeing me, maybe not behind the podium, but, you know, around and about. But a lot of important things for us to get done, you know, with all of that said, but around those objectives that we talked about. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna stay and see the sausage made. Excuse me if I saw it.
so the next agenda item is the minutes. So we have two sets of minutes. The October 23rd meeting and the November 13th meeting. So we'll take one at a time. The October 23rd. Does anybody have any comments or questions about those minutes?
I did get some feedback, so I could adjust one section that was left.
Okay.
As a runoff into nothing, but I'll take any other suggestions and get that back to you guys. Or we can conditional.
I was wondering, gave the feedback, there was just one sentence that sort of didn't quite end.
Yeah.
She wants to
I
just
probably
wrap
went
up that sentence and then we could approve it, subject to completion. I think that would be fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, content.
Did you want to make a motion?
Move to approve as to be amended slightly in the future by Jillian, this was the October 23 minutes.
Yes.
Second.
All right, so take a roll vote.
Yes.
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 And Brent?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. All right, the November 13th minutes that Bob had drafted. Any comments or questions on those? It looked good. Yeah, they look good, very concise at this point. Good. Okay, motion.
Motion to approve the November
Is it 13?
13 minutes as written.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And Brent?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The next, well, the next item was, the calendar. We have, I sent around within the PowerPoint presentation, we have the calendar for the upcoming, few months up, leading up to town meeting. The dates, none of the dates have changed, but there is a slight change to the end of February meeting. So our first meeting with the school department is on February 13th. There's a good chance that, and we'll talk about it later, that we may need an extra meeting with the school department this year. So I've scheduled that on February 27th. It wouldn't take up the full meeting, I don't think, and we could go on to articles after that. So that's
So say those dates.
so February. The two school department dates are February 13th and February 27th. And the only other thing I will mention is, Ed, you have the minute responsibility for this meeting.
Guilty as charged.
All right, and other than that, you know, the dates that we have in the calendar are pretty much the same. They haven't changed. None of the dates have changed. It's just what we cover it at one of the meetings. Any questions on that? All right. So, now, we come to sort of the main topic of tonight's meeting, which is, you know, to go through the department budget. And I wanted to just make some general comments just to set things up for everybody, particularly for the new members to describe, the review the process that we're gonna go through. What is it that we're trying to do tonight, and how does that relate to what we're going to do after the public meeting, that we will have, in a month or so. So as we think about budgets of individual departments, some are going to be very easy to review. They're non-controversial. We'll be able to fly through them. Others we'll have questions on. So, everybody, we should ask questions of any individual budgets that we have. Our goal is to get information, and we want to provide any feedback to the budget makers, our warrant committee budget guidance, the big overarching guidance that we did this year to the school and town departments, was meant to keep us within Prop 2.5, the Prop 2.5 limits. So it becomes important, for the warrant committee to think about and talk about the big picture from time to time. As the budget gets rolled up and we start to see some of the numbers from each of the respective groups. Is it landing in an area that we as a warrant committee are comfortable with? And if not, if that's not the case, think about what feedback we might provide, to the budget makers. And in terms of process, tonight we're not voting on anything. So it's really just about having a conversation with all the departments, learning, certainly appreciate all the town employees who are here tonight, and those who are joining us remotely: Amy Colleran, Andrew Foster, Georgia Colinas, and Maria Della Fuente. So we appreciate that they're here and available to answer our questions and provide any additional information. So again, the goal is to understand these budgets. If we have questions, ask them, get them answered tonight, or we need some follow-up. We'll ask for that too. If you have any concerns or feedback to give, that would be a good time to do that too. So again, we're not voting. It's more of a conversation, information gathering. It's a chance for the warrant committee to get a sense of how we feel about things and convey that back to Frank and Christine and the budget makers. Then we get to the public hearing sometime in March, and that sometime after that hearing, we will, before town meeting, we will vote as a warrant committee. And every warrant article, the warrant committee will take a public position on. Each member of the warrant committee is going to be voting, and will need to take a public position on all articles in the town warrant. So on the budget articles, which we're looking at now, we may approve what's presented to us and agree that it's what we want to see and send forward to the town meeting. Or there could be things that we want to talk about or concerns, and choose to present the budget and presented at the public hearing or go in a different direction. So it really depends, how we feel as a group. But tonight is just information and sharing reactions and impressions and things like that. So with that we thought, since we do have people who are present with us tonight physically from the town, that they should go first, to be fair. Since they're staying in this way. Frank, how do you want to do this? Do you want to? Who wants to go first? You want to go first? Sure. Go.
Oh, that hurt.
So Brent, I don't know if you
I'm the youngest out of all of them.
Brent, if you want to say something about the DPW budget before Mo starts.
I'll just say that we met twice, once in November, I think it was, and again just last week. The second time was specifically to review the budget. So I'd been given a budget summary back in November, and I'm pleased to see that in the documents that were circulated this week via email. Looks like the director found some money to put back. So the increase that he needed wasn't quite. It looks like it may not be as big as we discussed even last week. So But I'll let him, he's there, so he can describe it for you.
Sure.
Okay, great.
I'll start off with the highway budget. The only thing that stands out in the highway budget is stormwater management. In our MS4 permit that we have with Mass DEP, our stormwater management permit requires us to be in compliance with a lot of different activities. It gets to be more and more every year. A lot of people that haven't been as far along in the stormwater management, these cities and towns are putting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into their budgets to comply with DEP standards. We have kind of gone little by little, and every year we seem to be, having to put in a little bit more to cover some of the costs that we run into. We have 2,100 catch basins in town that we have to clean every year. With that, all the spoils that comes out of that, we have to remove from the town, and that's one of our biggest expenses to date. We also are under a phosphorus control plan that we had to develop through our permit. And with that phosphorus control plan, we are required in the next 5 years to remove anywhere between 150 to 200 pounds of phosphorus out of our system. And to do that, you need to do what they call best management practices. With our stormwater, we create new detention basins, retention ponds. We rehab what we have already to reduce some of that. We think we can get over 200 pounds per year with what we have planned, but it costs, that's what the 40,000 extra dollars is for, we have to have consultants. We try to do a lot of the work ourselves. We still need that support from consultants, and that's what that pays for. As far as you'll see for gasoline and diesel, even though we're trying to go green and electric, I just got a hybrid vehicle myself, but the cost of fuel has really risen in the last couple of years. Every year we increase, the gas prices have been increasing, and because of all the wars and unrest in the country, in the world, we're seeing gas prices spiking. So we end up having to increase our fuel just for the anticipation of what's going to happen. In the last couple of weeks, it's dropped, and now it's going to start to rise again, unfortunately. I think it comes down every time there's an election. So, but that's one of the issues we run into. This is all on the highway side. Everything else is pretty nominal. Then we go into water and sewer. With our new treatment plant, Sure.
This is purely a question.
Sure.
Where does phosphorus come from?
It's all in your fertilizers and a lot of different things that are man-made. So when you fertilize your lawn, it gets washed away down the street into a catch basin, into our waterways, and we're responsible for that.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's not good for the environment.
So we get
I don't fertilize.
there's a lot of green lawn.
You understand.
As far as water and sewer, we just recently built a water treatment facility off of Elm Street in the back properties. That water facility, treatment facility, we have 2 large pumping stations that go through that facility, cleans up all the iron and manganese, and gives us a lot of more clean water in that area. So that was really a huge plus for us in town. It also gives us redundancy in our system. Before, we were counting on only a certain amount of pumping wells. One well goes down, we have to put water bans on. We can't fill our storage tanks. Fire suppression gets to be an issue. The pressure out of the tanks when they drop too low, you don't have the pressures coming out of there. So it's really important that we have redundancy in our system, that we could rely on other pumping stations to help that out. So that does, one of the big things is that the maintenance of that plant, electricity costs, propane costs, that's reflected in these, in the increases in the water department.
So the 25,000 is for increased electric usage?
Yes.
That's what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
The consultant actually asked us to put in close to $200,000 last year. So we were kind of unsure of where we're gonna be at, so we put in a figure that was low, but now, we're trying to get to the point where we understand what it's gonna cost us year to year, because it's a brand new plan. Sewers are one of our bigger concerns. I'm not sure if you're familiar with I&I. It's inflow and infiltration in our system. Infiltration is where our sewer system should be a tight system, but you develop cracks over the course of years from aging pipes, from root damage, from a lot of different things that happen. When that happens, you get cracks in your system, and actually you get a lot of groundwater infiltrating into your system and eventually makes it to our wastewater treatment plant. Sometimes our facility is a 1.6 million gallon facility. That's what we can do daily to treat at the treatment plant. When we have these I&I events, sometimes we're in the neighborhood of 3 million gallons, which a lot of times you have to bypass certain systems in our services in our system. It's not that we're throwing any sewage into the Charles River. It's more the fact that it's a over the legal contaminant level. Still not anything harmful. It's just that we're out of compliance at times because of the amount of water going through. We are working really hard with capital to try to get these this I&I reduced. You never go. Yep.
What is I&I?
So it's inflow and infiltration. Infiltration when you get cracks in the pipe. Inflow is actually, if you think about a lot of homeowners may be connected directly into our sewer system with their sump pumps. And that's something that we cannot see from, unless we actually go into people's homes. So we're hoping that right now we found a large area, or a narrow area in the Harding and Phillip Street area that we find a lot of I&I coming from. So we're working with the consultant to try to narrow that down, try to reduce that down so that we can, so we don't have any compliance issues in the future.
Yeah.
So with all this rain, it's really difficult.
So that's the 25,000 in sewer chemicals?
The sewer, that's what,
Is that?
because of the amount of water coming through the system, we have to use more chemicals to kill what the bacteria and everything else, because we're bypassing certain contact time. So the more chemical you use, the better chance you're getting all of the contaminants out of the system before it goes out into the river. So. Sewer sludge disposal, that's another part of the issue where you're dropping a lot of the sludge that comes through. It's in holding tanks. We have to pump more out. The prices have gone up in chemicals and sewer sludge, and we anticipate it to stay rising. So these are nominal figures. It's for the amount of influent sewage that we treat every day. So. But welcome to take any questions that you have on anything you see in my budget.
I mean, it seemed like the big item was the $40,000
Stormwater.
management.
And then, like,
By the way, I
again,
should mention, sorry, I forgot, I should have said this at the beginning. I have confirmed with Christine and Frank that the budgets for the town side, there is no increase in FTEs except for the park and rec budget, which will have a capital of that. All the other departments, there's no increase in FTEs. So I just want to make sure that people understood that, in case they have that question. But sorry, I interrupted.
no. You're good.
So Mo, when you talk about the storm water management, and read all about the flooding and the increased amount of flooding, how did that
So the increased
project
amount
into the future for yourself?
as far as flooding, it's more on the sewer side. The flooding doesn't affect. It doesn't affect that more phosphorus, more contaminants are entering into our water system through our drainage system, because it gets flooded, it drains, and it goes into a lot of customers that have issues with their sumps, and there's no place for them to put it. we asked that, they're asking us to tie into our drainage system. We really can't allow them to direct connect into our drainage system without having them cleaning that water first. Because what we do is we sample every year, dry weather and wet weather sampling in all our outfalls all around the whole town. If there's any contaminants that are over the limit, we're responsible to track that down to see where it's coming from. So some people throw things in our basins, they pour in, things that they may not supposed to be put in there, and we find that it's called an illicit discharge. We find that information, we track it back, we have to clean that. So it's a constant cost to us to make sure our stormwater is in compliance. And our guys have been doing a great job over the years with our GIS, with our doing all the maintenance that you need to do. We sweep the roads. All the debris that comes from the roads adds to all this as well. So we sweep the roads multiple times a year. You'll see the street sweeper out all the time. So that's one of the next capital items in a couple of years. So
It was actually a question I'm gonna ask you about capital budget this year and into the next, in the 5-year plan, is there?
So we're looking at, a lot of the sewer needs to be looked at. We have an aging wastewater treatment plant. It was built in the 70s, where ARPA funding has been allowing us to, we're looking at doing a full assessment of the wastewater treatment plant right now. And that's going to show us what improvements we can make down there. You can't get rid of I&I altogether. The best thing to do is to reduce it and see what you can do, make improvements to handle more flow if needed at times. So when we do that, we're going to have projects coming up at the wastewater treatment plant to make improvements down there. So that's one of the things that for capital on the water side, on the sewer side.
And so you're working with the capital budget committee?
Yeah, it goes through the enterprise fund. It does go through that. It goes through, with the rates structure. We're doing a rate study as we speak, to make sure that we're, our capital projects are in line with our rate structure.
Okay.
But sewer.
Imagine that's a big ticket item.
It is.
Upgrade that sewer.
It is. And, even if we reduce I&I, we want to continue a maintenance program to keep that reduced. Because once you develop more and more cracks and you let it go without doing any kind of maintenance, we're really big into preventive maintenance. So once we get things fixed, we want to make sure it stays that way.
So you've done a nice job on North Street and did West Street. Where are we in the projection of future road work?
So I'm glad you said that. Well, not really, but
Really? And you won't like when I ask one.
So in our pavement management, it gives us kind of a segue into what roads that are best cost benefit to the town. Sometimes you have to change that depending on the winters, depending on the flooding. Hartford Street has become an issue lately. That's going to need a whole drainage system, or else we're going to see more and more closures. Causeway Street, you see closed a lot. There's nothing we can do about Causeway Street right now. I mean, you'd have to spend millions of dollars to widen it, to raise it, to do what you can. It's just in the, it was a farm road. It was, the culvert was replaced, but there's so much water that comes through that system that it's just impossible to handle, especially in these kind of events. We're looking at Bridge Street. We're looking at some of the subdivision work. We're looking at West Mill and Harding, but we also want to be in coordination with a couple different things. One with the state hospital, one with water and sewer replacements. So we have to look into that too, because you don't want to redo a road and all of a sudden have to rip it up in a couple of years because the water line needs to be replaced. You kind of have to do it all at once. Looking at sidewalks, we want to make sure this is a mobile community as well. And we have a lot of sidewalks in town that we try to rehab with our own staff. There's a lot of pressure on us to put new sidewalks in. I mean, everybody wants to have a sidewalk to their home and all the way to the center of town, and we'd love to do that. It's just that we have to prioritize. We have to take care of handicapped accessibility in a lot of our curb ramps. We did on South Street. Go down South Street.
Yeah. Good job.
We just did that, and all 27 curb ramps at probably an average of $3,000 to $4,000 each on those curb ramps. So it gets costly. But we're trying to put a program together to try to attack that, as well as the roadways, as well as the sidewalks, as well as the drainage and water and sewer. And it's a lot. So.
Any other questions for Mo?
Oh, I just had a quick question. Last year we did like merit increases and adjustments collective for the town. Is that the same this year?
Yes, so that be with one big, for now, we're putting that in one line, and then towards the end of the budget process to allocate and,
Okay, so we're not seeing it yet.
The cost of living stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But the longevity it should be in there.
And then
longevity should buy this.
Yeah.
okay,
So just for the new members, that's, so they budget central for the cost of living adjustment. And then they allocate that out to departments after when the budget's all set.
Should we think about fertilizer guidance? Would that help you with the phosphorus?
Yeah, education would be huge for the community. I mean, you know, we do offer different programs with our stormwater management. We the LEAF program. We do different things with the Ponset Stormwater Partnership that we're members with. Education is nothing better than that with public outreach for that.
Like some towns mandate these types shouldn't be used. Is there a specific problem you're having with different types?
It's not so much different types. It's just, you know, if everyone organic, we wouldn't have as much of a problem, but not everybody's going to spend the extra money for the organic unless you're really conscious about it. So Scott's and Pennington and all those, I'm sure they have quite a bit of phosphorus and there's other things that create phosphorus as well. It's not just fertilizers, but I don't have the list in front of me, but that's the main one. It's the fertilizers. And everybody wants a green lawn.
Any other questions for Mo? Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you guys.
Really appreciate,
Thanks a lot.
thank you for everything you do. For the town.
Thank you very much. Appreciate what you guys do. Thank you.
Okay, did you guys brush straws back there?
I need to be assured that town longer and I'm in place. Besides, you're gonna need my good mood after him.
Very pleasant.
Peter, I don't know if you want to say.
Yeah, I'll just say, I met with Chief Carrico on the 15th of December, had a nice conversation. It was my first conversation with him. I thought it was really clear, what sort of constraints he's operating under and what he's done to really maximize the service provided within that. I think he's got a very clear story that I'm sure he'll share with us. But I came away with a pretty good understanding. It seems like, and keep me honest, but it seems like EMT is rising as a share of your work, and that's changing sort of some of the cost mix, which was something to keep an eye on and plan for.
All right, good evening.
Sorry, I didn't get your name.
Carrico.
Carrico.
Yeah, CARRICO,
Right.
William C. one each. All right, so the fire department budget, basically, we're operating the fire department with 26 members, 13 full-time members, 13 on-call members. 2023 was our busiest year that we've had since I've been here. We did 1,530 calls. Of that, 60% were medicals. The budget that was presented has an overall increase of 45,756. It basically includes contract percent increases for 12 members, step increases for 6, vacation increases for 3, longevity for 7, a sick time increase over fiscal year 23, some educational incentives for 4 members, recall, which I estimate basically how many times I expect people to come back, how many box alarms. That number's actually gone down because I've made some operational changes. And a little increase for acting captain because of some of the vacation time and people not taking some time off.
We have vacation carryover. I'm sure you're aware that the personnel bylaw, it basically states that if you don't use your vacation time by December 31st, you can carry it over to September. In the past, that number has really hurt me because a lot of people have carried time over. And what happens is one of the difficult things for me is forecasting that carryover, because where I came from, everything reset July 1. So you had to use all your vacation time by July 1, and you got your new stuff in July. So there were some points where I had $60,000 in vacation time that was not, had no financial count to it. So potentially you could take that time. And a perfect example is my firefighters get personal time. They get 36 hours of personal time every year. So when it gets awarded on July 1, the firefighter took the time in December, and then he got awarded it again in July 1, and then he took it in like March or April. So in 1 year, he used 2 years of personal time, the way we do it here in the town. So it's very, very difficult for me to try to figure out where people are using things. But what I have done, I told the whole department, you have to start using it and burn it up by December 31st. So a good majority of the firefighters that I had used up all of their time, with the exception of 1 or 2, which had over 100 hours. And they have since started to dig into that time. So that number is starting to decrease. So it won't be much of a burden this fiscal year. I anticipate we should be pretty good by the end of this fiscal year.
And the impact of that is that overtime to cover.
Yeah, it's overtime to cover the shift. So what we try to do is we try to maintain a shift commander and 2 firefighters all the time. So that allows for ALS ambulance coverage. And what happens is if the ambulance goes to the hospital, I still have a shift commander here that the next call that comes in, he will respond with the off-duty personnel, and he will try to get the second ambulance on the air. It's a little difficult because we don't have enough paramedics, and one of the future needs that I have is hiring a fourth person on the shift, which would be another paramedic. So I'd be able to provide 2 ALS ambulances all the time. It happened today. The ambulance went to the hospital. We ended up doing a box alarm, which I call back any available person, come back. I did not get a paramedic. The patient was having some difficulty with her blood pressure. So her blood pressure was fine as long as she was sitting. She stands up, blood pressure drops, becomes dizzy, nauseous. So technically that's an ALS call. So I ended up having to call Millis. Millis came over with their paramedics. I handed the patient off, and then they ended up going to the hospital. They collect the revenue. This last year, that's happened to probably, we've had about 64 second medicals, 5 third medicals. So that means 3 medicals all happening at the same time. So that's ultimately our goal is we have to have a 4th person so we can staff both ambulances ALS. So we can always provide an ALS. You know, once you get 3 calls deep, it's just a roll of the dice. You start calling mutual aid to cover the town. I have advertised for over a month for a firefighter paramedic position because I had a captain resign. He went to become the director of the Mass Fire Academy. So I have an opening right now. I had 2 valid candidates apply. One was a paramedic, one was an EMT going to paramedic school. 15 minutes prior to the interview, the paramedic withdrew from the interview process. So right now, I have no valid candidates. I've advertised for over a month. I'm advertising again. I have another candidate that's out in the limb. It's not a simple process. There's some things that need to be vetted through. But right now I'm advertising for 1 position, and I have an open captain spot. I'm having a captain's exam on this Saturday. 7 out of the 8 eligible people are going to take the exam. I also have another captain that's advised me that he will probably be retiring in June or July. So ultimately I'll have 2 captains open. So I'm on the hunt as every other fire department in Mass. There are more positions than there are people available. And basically, if you are an up-and-coming firefighter paramedic, you can, let me see the contract in Medfield, let me see the contract in Franklin, let me see the contract in this town, and they basically can pick their department as long as they have a successful interview and they have no background that's questionable. One of the things that was a decrease in my budget, I know you guys like to hear that, is that on the expense side, we have decided, I was told by the town hall that we're going to take $75,000 out of the ambulance revolving fund. So any cost that I have associated with the ambulance will be taken out of the ambulance revolving fund. So I went through the budget meticulously and picked out all of those things that I usually would charge to the ambulance. And now that's going to be charged directly to that account, up to $75,000. I will anticipate that going forward, I could probably find some more little things like fuel. There's another thing that we could probably pick and apply to that account. But for this upcoming fiscal year, that's what we're going to do.
I add some context to that. I think I understand, and please keep me honest, that what was interesting to me about this, the fire department, was that there are elements of like a revenue generating. If you go help another town, you're gonna ultimately see some revenue from the insurance costs or
Correct.
through health insurance.
Yep, that's one of my, I have written down, to date, right now, we have $51,353 in BLS billing and $271,214 in ALS billing.
Yeah.
So if we go to Millis and we take an ALS patient out of Millis and transport them to the hospital, if they have great insurance, we can bill $2,200. So we end up collecting that revenue.
And now that revenue we're saying goes to the revolving funds, is that?
That money would go into the account. The mileage would go into a separate account, which we're trying to change because we want to get rid of that mileage account.
And so now some of those expenses are flowing over there too.
Correct. Now that money, the plumbing's coming back, so we're actually using some of that money to fund the operational, the expenses.
And then that goes back to if magically we had more ALS staff, we could maybe respond to more. It's not just pure cost. There's a revenue offset.
Correct.
So that's, I think, an interesting dynamic that took me a little while to wrap my head around, but I appreciated that.
Yeah, like the call that we gave to Millis, potentially we lost $2,200 in billing. And I look at that. We will never be self-funding because we just don't do enough volume.
Sure.
Even when I was down the Cape, we had so many ambulance calls. We were pulling in $2.5 million in ambulance revenue, and I had an operational cost of $4.9 million. So you'll never be able to make what you spend. Capital items, I have hose and nozzles replacement. I'm also trying to go after some federal grants. I was unsuccessful with the AFG grants. That's the Assistance to Firefighter grants. I had submitted for hose and nozzles. The next time that comes around, I'm going to submit that again. I also did a staffing grant for 4 firefighters. That was unsuccessful. It looked like the federal government targeted larger communities. So they were giving money to Worcester, Boston, $14 million grant awards instead of the smaller $1.2 million, which is what I was asking for. Just so you know, in grants since May of 2018, I brought in $600,000 in different grants total. Looking forward, fire inspector is something that is really a need that we're going to have for a full-time position. If you look at the amount of solar projects that we were inundated with these solar projects. So my fire inspector, who is also a shift commander, he's actually working right now. So what the fire inspector does is when he's on duty, he's also going out doing all these inspections. And when we become overloaded with inspections, he ends up coming back on overtime to go out and do inspections. But having that full-time fire inspector would be a bonus for us. The amount of the projects that we have are becoming more complicated. There's a lot more work being done. And it's so technically involved now with all the changes now that we're getting closer to becoming more compliant with NFPA and all the different international fire codes and all these other things that the state of Mass is starting to adopt. Really, that's about it.
Actually, a question.
Yeah.
You have in the area of grants, do you have grants that are funding, people?
Yeah.
That will end in the next year or two? There's an issue with how you deal with that.
Well, in that, especially that SAFER grant. So right now, the SAFER grant is full salaries for 3 years. It doesn't pay you any money for overtime, so it's your OPEB costs. It's all that costs for base salaries. So overtime is on you, equipment's on you, and then at the end of the 3 years, the community can cut those people loose and lay them off, or you can find the money and continue their employment. And that's the way the SAFER grant works. Every year it was different. There were years where they'd say they funded 100% the first year, 75% the second year, 50% the third, and then the fourth year, you had to keep them. So you couldn't let them go. So that was like the hook. And then after that, fifth year, you can do whatever you want.
So that's, when does that expire? 2 years, you said?
Well, no, I have to apply and be successful with that grant. So I haven't gotten it
Yeah, you
yet.
haven't. Okay, okay.
My hope was to get it, but it's kind of the trend, like I said, the trend was they were feeding departments, bigger communities, cities.
Okay.
Because right, it's like I said, almost every fire department's looking for firefighters right now. There's more jobs than people. I've never seen this before. Back when I was first hired, I used to be threatened, there's 100 people waiting to come in the building, and now there's no way. It's just amazing. I've just never seen this before. When I would put out an advertisement for a position, I'd get 90 applications. Now I got 2. I have some dreamers that go different parts of the country, but it's just that there's no way somebody's going to move from Iowa or Florida to here, and within 2 or 3 weeks notice. It's just, it's not feasible.
Do you think that that's,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just curious if you think that that's a function of like the amount of available workers, or that the work needed to meet all these new requirements have just like increased how many people the different departments need?
I think there's quite a bit of people that aren't entering the paramedic program. And what happened is we were stealing paramedics from Brewster Ambulance, Cataldo Ambulance. And what they did in turn was they raised their rates to be comparable with the fire departments, which kind of made the pool a little more challenging for us. Usually you could lure these people away with the salary, and now you can't do that. And now, because there's so many jobs out there now, that you can basically job search, and you can say, okay, I want to work in Franklin because they pay, $35 an hour starting. Or here, we're $30.
So how many people are you down right now?
Well, I have one position that's open, and my future needs is adding 4.
That's not in the budget.
That is not in the budget. That's to be discussed. Future date. And the one last thing that go ahead.
I'm sorry. On the issue of the fire inspector that you said is needed, given all the different inspections you're having to do. I was just sitting here thinking, and this may be completely impractical. Couldn't you hire a recent shout out to Brent Northeastern grad to give him some training? And
He's got to be certified. So you get certified by going to the Mass Fire Academy. And it also comes down to having people that can do all the jobs. So if I hire somebody who can only do one job, so now it's me and the fire inspector standing here. He's not certified as an EMT. He's only been brought in to do inspections. Then if I have a medical call, because I went on a medical call this morning, you know what I mean? That's the whole part of it. Because I thought through the process of hiring people who have one position. Like if you go and you say, okay, chief, I want you to hire 10 paramedics. So a medical comes in, so I call back the 10 paramedics. Now a fire comes in, or a fire alarm comes in. So now I'm calling back all the firefighters. So now I could have potentially 20 people standing there, where if that other call come in and I already did the recall, I could just send those guys who are already standing here. It's kind of like, I kind of think of it like having the Swiss Army knife, having the guys that can do all the jobs. And that would be the thing, is that this fire inspector that going future needs, he would also be a training officer. So he'd be training on duty training with the firefighters. He'd be doing the department training monthly, and having him not just do one role, but having to do multiple roles. And
Have you, I don't know if this is done in other towns, but is this an area where you could regionalize? Or?
Well, I'm always open to regionalization. It's just, then it comes into, I think it comes into those MOUs that you have to establish. That'd be something that we would have to look at. Yeah, there's a lot of.
How do you deal with the fire inspection now? Have you? You don't do them, or?
No. What happens is my captain that's on duty, we try to schedule things when he's available.
Okay.
So what I do is I have 2 captains that are trained in inspections. One is the lead, the second is the backup. And the backup primarily does the resale inspection. So we're required on the sale of a residential property, we're required to go out and inspect for operational CO and smoke detectors. And it's all based on when the house is built. So we have this chart. If it's pre-75, it has to be battery operated with a 10-year battery. And then it goes to the next tier, and then to the next tier, and to the next tier. So if we have a specialized inspection, we have to schedule it on the date that Captain King is available. Or I'm like the go-to, that if something has to get done, then I'll go out and take care of it. But I was really good as being a fire inspector 10 years ago, and then they changed the fire code. So they got rid of the old 527 code, and then made it 527 CMR 1, which incorporated this NFPA 1, and then they did Massachusetts amendments because Massachusetts has to be different. We can't just adopt what somebody already has. So now I have these two pieces, and then you have to look at this code and flip over to the other one to see if it's Massachusetts amended. So it's rather involved, and he's a great guy for it.
Any other questions? Chief? Okay, Brent, you got any questions for Chief?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Very awesome. Thank you. So if you guys have any questions at all, 911, I'll be right there. Thank you.
I've asked Frank to hand out just something for you guys to read. I understand you can't read it right now, but we'll talk about a few things, and if you're like me, you're gonna forget the minute you walk out the door, so I just wanted you to have something to go back to. So I certainly think with my budget this year, we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll go into a couple of things unless Pete, you want to say it.
I would just say, we met on also on the 15th, which I was getting a lot of meetings done Friday. I thought it was a great discussion, really happy to see the sort of, really good organized budget. And it sounds like with March, there's an upcoming vote in March on the civil service, which is sort of like a kind of running change, and it sort of dominates the discussion because it would be a change the one of the largest line items in the budget. So I think that's sort of the biggest challenge going forward, is to understand how do you manage to do that. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic that I'm sure you'll get into.
It's a very important vote at the end of March. The last town meeting we passed, a town meeting, but there was always this vote that had to happen. That it's important that pass.
So I'll speak to that. So the town really tried to make some incredible strides this year. First of all, settling what I think is arguably an extremely competitive collective bargaining agreement with the Medfield Police League. While making us highly competitive, we are about to experience the absolutely devastating effects of how competitive that contract is. And that is with our salary line increasing. I think we're going up 8%, if I'm not mistaken, and 10%, I believe, yeah. Yes, I would like to talk a little bit about that because I think it's the elephant in the room. It's a huge line increase. So what the town had agreed to with the union is that they placed a strong emphasis on education. And there are plenty of reasons and really fantastic reasons for that. Highly educated officers tend to use less force. They compile better police reports. We have better solvability rates. And they bring less liability in terms of unprofessional or misconduct. And those are the things that cost towns money. The big change is that in 2025 in July, their education incentive will become part of their base wages. And so what we currently do is we work through FELSA with our system. So basically, if I have a police officer who works 20 hours of overtime, he's actually have got to hit 181 or 182 hours in 28 days of regular work before that education incentive gets included into his overtime. Most of the guys don't do that. Our officers are afforded incredible amounts of time off, earned time off. So they get a lot of vacation time, sick time, personal time. So very rarely do they hit that 181, 182 in the 28 days. What this does by putting the education incentive into their base wage is it automatically increases their overtime rate. So it increases their overtime rate on average by 32%. So I'll give you some numbers because I do want you to understand that as a manager of this organization, I'm working tirelessly to give us efficient police services. Yeah.
So the education incentive, so this is for them to take classes at community college or for them, what are they being incentivized to do?
So there used to be something called the Quinn Bill, and what it said is if an officer possessed a degree, associate's, bachelor's, or master's degree, they were given a percentage of their base wages for having attained that degree. Basically, a higher educated officer is a better police officer. When Deval Patrick was governor, he took away that incentive and some of the towns adopted the incentive. So for our officers, it is 10% for an associate's degree, 20% for a bachelor's degree, and 25% for a master's degree. So these are significant increases.
And this is all in the collective bargaining.
It is all as part of the
That's all
collective
been part of the
bargaining.
base. This has all been,
Yeah.
negotiated.
Right.
So this is the negotiated agreement. I will say that the education incentive alone is $219,497. That is based on the number of degrees. $219,497 is what we pay currently in our education incentive. I am about to hire, we just hired 2 officers tonight. That's where I was earlier. We are hiring 1 more, which will bring us back to a full complement of officers. We were very fortunate to get some transfers in to our organization, and I will talk to you a little bit about civil service and where we are with that. I said it at the the select board meeting tonight. We are getting our staffing back on because we have good young officers who are talking about our police department in a positive way. And that's what's getting people to come to us. This education incentive, no doubt. So when I took over, one of the first things I noticed was that we were running an extraordinary amount of overtime for an agency our size. In the 7 fiscal years prior to my coming to Medfield, we averaged 10,796 hours of overtime per fiscal year. In fiscal year 18, the department had increased that number to 11,782 hours of overtime. And in fiscal year 19, we were on pace for 11,635. I took over at the end of April and we reduced that number by 50%, only utilizing 900 more hours for the remainder of the fiscal year. Since I have taken over the budget, we have reduced our overtime from an average of 10,796 hours down to 7,714, a 33.3% decrease in our overtime hours.
How did you do that?
By having some more accountability. I think I pay attention to numbers. The numbers are kind of in my wheelhouse. I think I'll tell you the one rule I made when I got here is I simply said all overtime is approved. I just need to know where you're going to be and what time you're going to be there. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but a 33.3% reduction in overtime as a result.
And that's gonna hit what fiscal year? That is 23.
That is how we have been averaging. That's our average over the last 4 years is 7,700. This last year, we did 8,350 hours, 800 and I believe 97 or 79 of it was attributed to training. 5,299 of those hours are for personal time off. So these are our officers taking vacation, sick, holidays, personal time. That amounts, for those of you who want to do the math, our people took 662 days off last year.
So with the,
Why does personal time count as overtime?
So we run our organization at 19 sworn. So it's myself, the deputy, and 17 officers. In order for us to staff by population for what's a safe number to actually protect the town at a population of roughly 13,000, we should have a minimum of 3 officers out on the street. That number can flex based on, different factors. The summertime is a little bit slower. But it means that every time a police officer takes a day off here, I have to backfill that position. So what you'll see in my budget is what we actually have to do is take our hourly wage. I have to do an average of our hourly wage now, including their education incentive. And then that average has to be applied to how many hours I'm going to use for my personal leave. So the hours I know my officers are going to take off. 25 vacation days, 3 personal days. Roughly, they've been averaging about 10 sick days. That's the industry norm right now, is a lot more sick time is being used. They get up to 6 comp days and 12 holidays. So a brand new officer walking in up the street gets roughly 43 days off a year.
so the reduction, I'm sorry, it's a reduction, the increase to a full complement. Would you anticipate that will also be a reduction in the overtime because of less need to cover, or is that not so much?
No, it'll just be how it gets spread out. If anything, you might see an increase because we're bringing in veteran officers, so they're coming in at those higher levels of earned time off. We do award it by contract. The rate we were using, so for example, I can tell you that with our current staffing, I know that I'm going to have 2,560 hours to backfill for vacation alone. The average rate of pay at this point, if I take the median of all of my officers, is $66.65 for a total of $170,624. Ultimately, what I budget for my overtime, I've had to increase by 32%, which is around $200,000. So when we did the cost out for this contract, we estimated the contract was going to be $240,000. 43,000 of that was the percentage increase, and the other 197,000 is the overtime increase because their rate has gone up exponentially. If I have one of my senior sergeants working, he will be getting a rate of pay of $87 and change per hour.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So in terms of the change from FY24 to FY25, that 243,000, like you said, 219 of it was due to the special, the educational incentive. Right?
So that's a portion of it, but that's not the total increase amount because we were paying an educational incentive. But some people were at a flat rate.
Okay.
So in this last contract negotiation, they negotiated to go back to the percentage rates.
That's what I want to understand is what was the deal before the new contract came into place?
So there was a hybrid in place. So some officers who had been here with the original Quinn bill maintained the original Quinn bill. So those were percentages. Our newer officers were at flat rates.
Got it.
But as every raise and every contract went, that disparity got larger and larger because the percentage employees, their degrees went up as their contract or their base rate went up. And our newer employees were flatlined at a flat rate. So that was one of the negotiated items. It was the big negotiation of this last contract.
Okay. Okay.
And is it a 40-hour work week? And if you've taken time off during that, does that count towards your hours work?
So by contract, our officers work a 4 and 2. They're obligated to work 1,944 hours. Just to give you an idea, the average American on a 5-day work week works 2,080 hours a week. It really has to do with a brand new officer walking in the door, gets 10 vacation days, 12 holidays, 3 personal days, and up to 6 comp days, and 15 sick days. That's year 1. we're finding on average, they are using the majority of that time off. So I take those hours and when I'm looking at, so 80 hours to backfill for 10 days vacation, roughly another 10 days or 80 hours for sick time, another 24 hours for personal time. All of that gets added up. On average, I'm running between 5,300 and 6,000 hours a year just to backfill for personal time.
Are they unused vacation and sick time, carryover?
It carries over until the following September and then it has to be used.
Really different than the fire.
And 4 and 2 is 4 days work and 2 days off, and it just cycles.
Correct. Yes, so on a 4 and 2 schedule, they actually work less than, like I said, the average American does 2,080 hours in a year. A 4 and 2 schedule means that you only do 5-day work weeks, 2 out of every 6-week cycle.
So it's 4 days work, 2 days off.
Correct.
4 and 2.
Yep,
How long are the shifts?
8 hours. We do 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7.
Well, you've done a great job managing the difficult overtime situation and staffing. You're close to full staffing now?
We are waiting just to get the paperwork in, to make the official announcement that we are back at full staffing.
That's great.
Awesome.
I do want to let you know that that was very difficult to do with civil service. We had 262 candidates given to us for our civil service list. Of our first top 100 candidates, we only had 7 people come and sign for the department, and 6 of them withdrew within the first week. We had to go over 165 names down the list to find 3 qualified candidates. I won't continue this practice that we have had of hiring people because we are a safety department, because that costs us money. What we are getting are candidates who want to go someplace else, but will put us down on the list. They come here, we train them, and the minute they are trained, they walk out the door. Training costs for an individual officer over $60,000 per officer. Their uniforms, the academy, and then I have to pay their salary for 6 months and backfill their position. And that is the vicious cycle that we have been in, which is why it was imperative for me to take some transfers. Those are people that are coming here because they want to come here.
Okay. So you're not worried about these new hires because they're transfers.
I'm less worried.
Less.
This is why we have to get this vote approved at the end of March. So
Should have switched to the other.
She doesn't have to be on the civil service.
Right.
So
You can hire any.
Right.
we got our list in July, and I'm still trying to finish hiring off of it. The second thing is I haven't been able to promote anybody. Civil service had one of their promotional exams challenged in the courts. The courts determined that the exam had a disparate impact on the minority population, and they reissued their exam. I will tell you, I think what they've done with their exam is an abomination. They are including, so previously you had to have a minimum cognitive score that showed your ability to understand the law and then your judgment to apply it. You had to have a score of 70. And then after achieving that score, things like your seniority, your experience, your trainings would come in to bolster up your score. They now factor that into your base score as well. So we conceivably have people that are scoring 60 on a promotional exam that are going to be supervisors. I think it's a travesty for our organization and our profession, and I think we're going to perpetuate poor leadership by doing it. So, but that is the system that civil service is in. They didn't promote anybody for over a year, so I did provisional promotions, which is entitled. I'm hoping to get 1 or 2 people off the civil service list to promote. I need 4.
And if the vote in March is to go off of civil service, will you then be able to promote within your own criteria, or what will the time frame of that be?
We negotiated with the union. So right now, the process for civil service, they finally did a test in September. I still do not have the results. of the test from September. It's a computer test. You take it on a computer, so I don't know why I don't have the results yet. It's a 90-day turnaround is what we negotiated with the union. Sole test vendor that comes out scored, very, very brief appeals process, but I should have my results within 90 to 100 days.
Well, to Steve's point, I think we're very fortunate to have your leadership and Chief Carrico, the same in terms of balancing, budget constraints that the town works within and the need to perform the services. So thank you.
And we appreciate you doing this, very thorough memo. I will read it. I will read it.
Statistics, yeah. Just one last thing closing, and then I'd certainly happy to take any questions. I spoke to Chief Carrico about this. This is actually something that he has been pretty passionate about. And I think he's kind of got me at a point where I'm on his team. And we also had our new deputy come in from Rentham, who has been through this process. There is a way for us to consider cutting our budget. And it would be the regionalization of our dispatch center. Our dispatch center currently costs me $259,000 in salary, not including benefits, an additional $9,000 in training for our dispatchers. I do have to cross-train all of my officers on dispatch. That's another $17,900 for us to do that. Plus, we have to buy all of our equipment, maintain it, have maintenance contracts, and we're required by state law to audit our systems on a monthly basis, which are man hours. I have to have somebody sit and listen to our dispatch calls, and that's what they do for hours a day. The ancillary costs of having that facility here are upwards of $400,000 salaries all in. Our dispatchers do a fantastic job for what we have, and I certainly would never say that they're not giving you a great service. But the reality of it is, if we go to a regionalized dispatch, we know we have 2 dispatchers listening at any point in time, and the volume of calls that they take just hones their skill better than we can provide here. I know there are some people that believe having this center here provides a level of community interaction, but I'll tell you that none of my dispatchers are from Medfield. This is a job for them. They learn the town like anybody else does by coming to work every day. It's a consideration. I know some people will have opinions on it, but I did want the Warrant Committee to kind of put that in the back of their heads that this is an area we could probably cut at least $400,000.
Is regional dispatch, is the regional dispatch widely used by other communities?
Yes, as a matter of fact, just this last year, Sherburne and Holliston, I think most recently a month ago, went to regional. The state certainly is throwing a lot of money behind it to towns to get them to do regional. They haven't come out and said yet that that's what they'd like us to do, but I'll tell you that they are telling us in a lot of other ways. They are no longer doing our recording services for us. So this year we had to purchase our own recording devices for our 911, all of our maintenance contracts for it. And then we have to self-audit for those and do all of our discovery. So because we do all the recording here, anytime we have a case go to court, we have to go back and prepare all the tapes for court, just the man hours associated with it. So they're quietly.
Yeah, with these other towns that have already regionalized, are they doing it with, how big is the group that they're regionalizing? Is it 2, 3 towns that are getting together?
So a lot of the regional centers that are already established have waiting lists at this point. They don't want to get so big that they can't manage. So they have, 4 or 5 towns. We did have a study done for Medfield that agreed that Dover, Millis, Bellingham, us, and I want to say Medway were the most reasonable regional fit. Chief Sapphire, over in Millis was willing to entertain having his locale be the center of that facility. Like I said, I think there'd be some pushback from people, some people in town. I'm sure my dispatchers are, I warned them tonight that I was gonna say this, so they're not caught off guard. I just think it's the way, it's where we see small towns going.
Right.
There are obvious, huge financial implications.
And those are big numbers, and
Yeah.
with technology today, you know, that's, I would think that we would think hard about trying to get to a regionalized model.
One of the things that Chief Carrico said when he was talking about why he wouldn't just hire an inspector, I want to piggyback that with you. My dispatchers are lovely people and they do a fantastic job, but they can only do one job for me, and that's pick up the phone. If I were to remove 4.5, because we have a part-time dispatcher, I would still want to man the front of the building. There are many ways to do that, but even if I manned it just during the day, kind of normal business hours, if I can pick up 2 police officers, then that's somebody that can take a report at the window. Right now, my dispatchers have to call someone in. They can't take a report at the window. It's somebody that if we had an emergency, could leave that office and respond out to an emergency. So I think, just I get a little more bang for my buck.
Yeah.
So this sounds like motherhood to me. Would be, I mean, I get it, you're dispatchers. And I'm no disrespect intended to them. But other than that, is there any constituency that would be opposed to this?
I do think that there is, and it's a misconception, but I think that there are some people that believe that when you pick up the phone and somebody in that office answers, you're getting a better level of service. It's a perception, right?
No, right. I mean,
Perception is greater than truth.
It's also a perception, like they think that you're taking away that person at the window and you come into the.
Right.
Correct.
And there's not gonna be anybody there.
Yeah.
but people in this town,
Right.
so there's. Gotta be careful how I say it. People in this town are concerned about taxes.
Yes,
And the $400,000 savings, whether that's applied to increased staffing for the police department, which many people would support, or for anything else. That would be a popular thing to present to the town at a town meeting, I would think. So what's the sort of next step, to go to the selectmen and see if we get this ball rolling, or?
I think we need to prepare, we've already started the process to prepare some actual numbers. So one of the data points I'd like to put together and share is, okay, if we're talking about taking somebody out of that office from 7 PM on, well, how many times have we actually had a person walk through that door after 7 o'clock and need some type of assistance? I'll tell you right now, in the 5 years I've been here, probably less than 6 times. But you're paying a salary to cover that entire time.
yeah.
I think the deputy came from Rentham. They switched over to this model a while ago, and he said it was seamless. He said that the responsiveness, they go in, they ring the bell, and he goes, you're right on camera. Somebody answers the phone immediately at the dispatch center, and you're already talking to somebody. So I think it's about putting together some data points, anticipating the pushback, and then, presenting a reasonable, logical argument to it.
Well, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but certainly for me, I would encourage the select board to sort of, definitely dive into this issue and pursue it, because I think that's a serious number. We have a lot of challenges with our budgets, so
It's,
if you can help, that would be great.
I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that those are human beings sitting over there as well, and they're good people. I will say that a lot of the regional centers, if they come with a recommendation for the chief, will offer them jobs. Yes.
So there's only 2 dispatches that we have?
We have 4 dispatchers in
I was
total,
gonna say, okay.
and a part-time, but we only have 1 on duty at a time. So
Right.
even like when we had the storm the other day, I had to pay overtime to have a second person come in just because of the call volume.
I think some of the challenge is education, right?
Absolutely.
Educating people what this means and how things might change and what it means to them, and some of the things you talked about tonight. And that will go a long ways to clearing up some misperceptions that people might have, that you're taking something away.
Even civil service, we had some feedback from some members in town that said that this was going to be a detriment to veterans and disabled veterans. I tried not to take it offensively, having come from a military family where my father served proudly for 20 years and we traveled all across the world. I mean, I was actually a military brat. And then I looked and I said, of our civil service list and 262 candidates, not a single one we signed for us was a veteran or a disabled veteran. And all we did is work language in that we would give preference to that category. We recognize that it brings value. So, so same thing, just kind of educating people, and it's not the big scary thing everybody thinks it is.
I had one question.
Yes, sorry.
The other line item that was growing was, and we talked a bit about it, was I think the radio equipment, and you had a shift to a maintenance contract that seemed to drive some costs as the state did less on the 911, I think you talked about.
Yes.
Is that something that could also be, something about equipment and maybe saving some maintenance contract costs there?
Yeah, so our two big costs are the recording costs that came in. The state said, we're not going to listen to your tapes anymore, figure it out. So we had to go buy the equipment and the maintenance contracts. I did get a grant for the equipment. We actually have done fairly well with our grants this year. I got a grant to cover the equipment, but not the maintenance contract. So that was, I want to say $4,500. I know I put it in here. The other part of it is our towers for our radio system are in town. One of them is up at the state hospital at the water tower, and the other one, we call it Mount Nebo. It's not Nebo at all. I don't know why this is a town thing. No. But we've had catastrophic failures with them twice now. We just had another one the other day. Anytime we get inclement weather, microbursts or something like that, and the tower gets affected, it is a minimum of $3,500 for them to climb the tower just to tell us if there's a problem. So when we have these back-to-back instances, oh God, before I leave, I have more bad news. Sorry. I'm responsible for line painting. Our budget is unfortunately under by 100%. We are working with the company. It is a lower bidder company that goes through the state, the vendor. We budgeted for 14,000 and change this year. They increased their prices by double.
What line item?
So it is a different budget.
Yes.
So I have animal control, street signs, and then traffic markings.
Yeah, especially page for animal control, so traffic marking.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So right now, my traffic markings, we shifted some of the line painting over to DPW. I still needed to do the long lines. So those are the double yellow lines and the white fog lines on the side. We budgeted at 37 cents per linear foot. They sent us a bill for, for 0.037 cents per linear foot. They sent us a bill at 0.079. So we were well under budget, and we just got their bid for next year. Their bid is 0.089 is the new bid. We have 408,000 linear feet. So we are going to need to increase that line item to 32,600 roughly.
From 14,983 to 32,600.
Yep, it is the single most staggering increase that we've seen in any of our contracts.
Okay, and no more bad news?
No, I'm sorry. Yes.
I have a quick question going back to the regional dispatching. Is there any communities that is kind of meeting in the middle where you're pulling the resource of the technology and then the maintenance of the technology and the reporting rather than the dispatching?
I want to say no, but I don't want to give you an ignorant answer either. So if I can get back to you.
Yeah,
and
I was just curious as to direction.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to do a fairly educated guess, they've pulled completely. The discovery aspect of it and the recording is actually incredibly time consuming.
crazy.
Yep, so you go through and when we get a discovery request, we have to present not only the 911 calls, but what's called the turrets. So those are all the communications that take place between the officer and dispatch. But we can't send over a discovery, let's say somebody called in an unrelated matter. It's not like I can batch out, hey, the call started at 7 and ended at 7:30 and just batch it and send it. We actually have to go through and listen and identify the turrets that belong in discovery.
Yeah. But
Yeah, so to push that clerical side of it to another company or another organization is huge.
Yeah.
They said there are so many man hours that are associated with having this beyond that phone call.
Yeah.
But I can get you definite answer.
Yeah, okay. Just very.
Any other questions for the chief? Anyone else with a question? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very-
I'm sorry I was so long-winded and took so much of your
Well,
time.
Thank you for doing a great job. We
I felt
appreciate
like if
it.
I was coming in with this huge number, I needed to give you something.
Thank you, Chief. Be
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night. I hope it goes quickly.
Chief.
All right.
All right. Okay. So we will have to promote next, who do you think we should do?
Order here and we have PG facilities.
Facilities, okay, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay. So while you're promoting Amy, if you want to say anything, Pete, feel free to.
So yeah, I met with Amy, who is very knowledgeable, and we had a great discussion. I learned about, there are a total of 3 employees in facilities. I didn't realize, so I spoke to her that 80% of Amy Collins' budget is paid by the school department. And so only 20% is paid out of the line item that we see here for salaries. She has 2 employees, they are paid out of this. This should, I think and hope will be a short presentation by Amy because she's done a great job of keeping everything very flat. She's instituting cost savings in various areas and has kept the budget down. So the only thing I would add is, this gets back to a question Jill asked earlier, which is that you'll see that the salary line looks essentially flat. That's because there's going to be the increase that will be given to employees in this is in the human resources budget. And that will be taken care of down the road.
Okay, great. What's this called?
It's
Buildings and property maintenance, buildings and property. Not
Not
inspections.
inspections.
You want buildings and property maintenance. Yeah. So Amy, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Thanks for being patient and waiting.
Sure thing.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we don't feel like you have to talk for 10 minutes, but you know,
Okay.
you're welcome if you want to, but because I think your budget is fairly straightforward, except for one item, right?
Yes, yeah. Now I should be short and sweet. So I'm pretty much level funded this year. I didn't have any contract renewals to needed for this year. So that would be really the change on my operating budget would be that building maintenance contracts. That's trash recycling, cleaning contracts, preventive maintenance of boilers. So I didn't have any renewals. So that would really be the only thing that's driving my my budget up. My budget also comprises of the building maintenance and repairs. That's sort of everyday repairs needed for the buildings. Most of the utilities for the buildings, electric, heat, water, and sewer. I have miscellaneous operating expenses that are professional development, office supplies, cell phone costs, and obviously salaries for the 3 employees. So that's the only increase I'm anticipating is I do have a longevity for 1 employee and COLA for the other 2. So as Pete had said, yes, the town side only pays 20% of my salary and the school is 80%. I do have an operating budget on the school side as well, but that will be presented by Michael LaFrancesca with the school department. I also have the Municipal Building Stabilization Fund. That's $1 million funded each year for capital improvement projects. Those are reviewed and approved by the Capital Budget Committee each year. One other funding source that I have is the DOER, that's the Department of Energy Resources. Each year they have a Green Communities grant that we apply for. There are green initiative projects that they fund up to $200,000 a year. For example, this year we had 4 projects awarded that equal $200,000. A couple of the projects they're adding insulation to the town hall attic and replacing 3 rooftop units at the public library. So as long as the projects are completed and billed 100%, we're eligible to submit an application each year. So we will continue to apply each year. I do work with the MEC, the Medfield Energy Committee, to they look at my capital projects and see what projects might be able to be covered by this grant. So yeah, the only future operating budget changes I see again are if I am putting out to bid some of the preventive maintenance contracts. Those are typically a 3-year contract. We do have the ability to extend it up to 5 years. I did that with, say, the cleaning contract, which was supposed to be put out to bid COVID year. So I thought it was in their best interest to keep our contract where it was, because the cost would have been absurd. So we were able to extend that contract for 2 years. So that went out to bid last year, as well as the trash and the recycling. So yeah, and that's sort of all I was going to say today. But if anyone has any questions about the particulars of my budget, please ask.
Yeah, Amy, on the 20,000 reduction in was that the town garage electricity?
Yes, yeah. So that was so we had solar panels installed last year. So that's an anticipated. I didn't realize it was 20. I thought it was 10, but so we're anticipating a savings in the electrical because of the solar panels installed. So that was great.
Nelson's flat.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All correct, Amy.
Yeah, well, we're all down. But
The rest of the budget's in the schools.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So this is pretty tight. Yeah, it's pretty tight every year. Yeah. One part of it is, so I do have a maintenance repair for the buildings, which I typically, there's a little bit of money for each building that that's under my umbrella. With that Municipal Building Stabilization Fund, we do have $175,000 for emergency repairs. That's extremely helpful, especially if I have something major going on at one of the buildings. I do have the opportunity to present to the Board of Selectmen for approval for emergency repairs for, say, if a boiler goes down or a rooftop unit goes down, where it would completely destroy my budget, but I have that ability to request some emergency funding. So we've established that the last few years, which has been very helpful.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Amy?
Looks great.
No, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Georgia. Okay. That's all we're meeting on the day.
Yeah, so we'll go quickly. So Georgia and I met, and she was very generous with her time, went over not only the treasurer and collector duties, but also went through the trust funds and how those are managed and things like that. So as I said, she's very generous with her time and helped me to understand how this works and what goes on. So, Georgia, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm going to keep it short and simple because my bedtime is quickly approaching. I will start with the treasurer collector's budget. No major changes in the treasurer collector's budget, $50 increase for longevity in the salary line. My office has 2 full-time staff and a part-time payroll person. The operating expense side of the budget is level funded, except for the one line item, which is the contract services for ADP payroll. We outsource our payroll. Keep in mind that that line is both town and school expense payroll. 70% is school and 30% of it is town. The large increase is mainly attributed to the fact that we are having to do a lot of custom reporting for a lot of the vendors that we deal with, so that we can import files over to them. And that is the reason why we have an 18% increase this year. Other than that, there is no other increase in the treasurer collector's budget for this fiscal year 25 upcoming budget. I don't see any major increases within the next 3 years in this budget.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
When debit, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, I know one of the additional handouts we provided to the committee was it's a new request this year to sort of do the spreadsheet that has the investment accounts on it.
They're not really investment accounts. They're trust funds that are invested. So these trust funds are under the custody of the treasurer. A trust fund is established with a sum of money that is set aside and invested for a specific use for the future. We currently have about 25 or 30 trust funds that I have inherited. The last few years, we've also increased the number of trust funds. The stabilization ones are mainly popular. They are a terrific tool for many of the municipalities, especially in trying times. So these trust funds are under the custody of the treasurer. Each trust fund is unique. Most of the trust funds have a trust fund document. They set out the guidelines, whether the balance can be spent or only the interest can be spent. The trust funds are not invested with general fund revenues. They are invested separately because the interest is allocated among all the trust funds. They are invested with Bartholomew and Company, which is an investment firm that 85% of all municipalities in the state of Massachusetts utilize. Keep in mind that the trust funds are invested according to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44 and 55, and they adhere to the Mass legal list of investments. If you have any specific questions on the trust funds, I'd be happy to answer them. If you want to email me with specific questions, I'd be happy to respond back.
I found this to be very helpful. It's an excellent document that you put together. I know you work with Frank.
Frank put this together, yes.
And it's it has a lot of information on it for who the appropriating authority and if there's a restriction on the trust fund, what type of restriction it is for the gifts. So I think it's very helpful. Does anybody have questions on any of these funds?
I can also update it for you. I am finishing up my December reporting, so I can update that for you for the quarter end for December as well.
All the big money is in the first,
Exactly, yes.
4 or 5, which are the stabilization and the pension. Next one is the cemetery. That's a big item.
Yes.
And then the library. And I guess the municipal insurance is all trust fund commissioners one. That's a pretty big one too. But you can see there's a lot of small ones.
Yeah. So how was the income that's generated in these funds reflected?
The income is the income is generated with their investments that are per Mass General Laws, Chapter 44. Most of them are U.S. Treasury bonds. I do have a legal investment list. I will share, Deb, I did open that email this evening. I will send over that portfolio listing to you tomorrow. There are various investments. The income is allocated to all of the investments based on the ending balance of the end of the quarter. So that is how it's allocated. So obviously those with the largest balance get the largest amount of income.
Yes, they're prorated, yeah.
None of the income.
It's prorated. It's prorated.
Outside the operating
Right,
budget.
it's outside of operation.
The income that we budget, the operating budget is for the general, the general accounts that the town uses for tax payments and things like that.
Right.
So.
So for example, the cemetery budget, each year in the cemetery budget, we usually take the income from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Trust Fund, and we take that income to reduce the operating expenses of the cemetery budget. So that is where the income comes from. It comes from the Cemetery Perpetual Trust Fund to reduce the operating budget of the cemetery. So theoretically, you can take a look at some of the other trust funds and you could probably do the same. As long as it's in the guidelines of the trust fund document. So for example, like one of the library, like the Catherine Bell Library Trust Fund, that was bequested to the town of Medfield by a resident in town who has passed away to benefit the library or a portion of the library that benefits children. So again, you could take the interest from that trust fund and reduce the operating cost of a portion of an expense in the children's library, for example.
If the trustees vote for it, or if it's
Correct.
in the, or if it's allowed the document.
This specific trust fund, the library ones are under the authority of the trustees, correct? The library trustees, yes.
Is there a point at which these become de minimis and you would seek to distribute them and not have to deal with the accounting headache of them?
Most likely, but I would need to find out. I would have to go to the trust fund documents. For example, I'm working on one now, the Washburn one, which is a very small one. One of the descendants is nearing the end of her life, and she wants to see the balance. She wants to close out the account and be able to gift it to a certain department in town. So at some point, yes, the smaller ones, should diminish, at some point. But at the same time, when you start reducing the amount that's in there, you're also going to be earning less interest too. So these are also earning interest while they're in there.
So the ones that are for pumping station operations for subdivision, does that go into?
So those are paying the electric bills for the pumping station. So that money was, those monies were set aside by the builders for those areas in town. So that money was set up as a trust fund. So the interest that's earned on those accounts is used to pay, say, the electricity on the pumping station.
Okay. Question.
So some of these could impact the operating budget to the extent that they're taking advantage of picking up costs or allocating.
It offsets something you didn't require.
Right, the pension one is a perfect example of that. That's a big one.
The pension one is a big one. I don't know if many of you remember Elmer Portman, who was on the Warrant Committee. That started off with $1,000 trust fund. And look where it is now. It's at $3.4 million at the end of September.
And there's quite a few library ones, which I'm assuming the Board of Library Trustees is overseeing all of those.
Yes, they are the ones that have the authority to spend from that. That is correct.
Okay.
So that is
What?
the other portion, and that's my treasurer side is the trust funds. And then we have, the general fund investments, which, are mostly, your regular money market accounts. The town of Medfield is a municipality, but it is a business. It has its revenues and it has its expenditures. Safety, liquidity, and yield, are most important to me as treasurer. Whether it's trust fund money or whether it's general fund money. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I just have one quick question. What
Sure.
is the antiquities fund?
We left it blank because I need to find the trust fund document.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of these I inherited 33 years ago. And a lot of these trust fund documents are not available. So I'm going to have to search that one out. That's why we left that one blank.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Any other questions for?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
If you have any other questions, just email me. I'm happy to answer.
All right. We
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Georgia.
Thank
Have
you.
a great evening. Stay safe.
All right. Moving along, Deb, which one should we do next?
Let's
We have
see.
2 left, right? They both should be easy.
Building inspections, how about that?
Oh, sorry, Dana actually had something personal come up last minute. I meant to
Oh, okay.
start with that. So he's on any.
So we'll move him to next week.
Yes.
Okay. So Maria. Maria
We have Maria and Yvonne.
and who? Oh, Yvonne. I forgot about Yvonne. That's right. Who do you want to do first?
Yvonne,
Yvonne?
he's already given us.
Yeah. Let's do Yvonne. Yvonne. Can you promote her? Okay. Another hard one.
He's already done the hard work for us.
Good evening, Yvonne.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for hanging in there.
Yes.
No problem. I have a very easy budget, and so I'll be very fast.
Okay.
Okay, so the only thing I changed this year were 2 things. I changed my dues budget by $65 to reflect what the dues will be for next year. And I changed my professional development budget by $1,000. My assistant received her certification last year. And in order to maintain our certifications, we have to have so much education and professional development and so many credits every 2 years. And so I needed more money in the budget to pay for her school as well as my own. So those are the only 2 changes I have. Most of my budget is made up of consultant fees. The $5,000 consulting and legal fees pays for our maps. And then my contractor services, personal property, and the real estate appraiser for $6,800 and $8,200. Those are paid to Patriot. They assist with the valuation process for our personal property and our commercial property. So those are the biggest part of my budget. Other than that, it's postage, office supplies, registry fees. And that's about it. If you want to know anything about my budget, I won't bore you. You can check out the GFOA budget. I have a full description of what we do, what we handle. I have a full-time staff person, my administrative assistant, Kathy, who's been with me for since I've started. She's been with the town for almost 20 years. And I have a half-time person, Diane. She works 20 hours. And she's been with us now for 6 years. So does anybody have any questions?
Now, I apologize on the spreadsheet that I distributed. It was like one of the formulas got. deleted, so-
I figured that out.
Yeah. Increases there, it's just not seen, so.
Yeah.
I apologize. Sorry, Mike.
No worries. Any questions?
Oh,
for
okay.
Any questions for Yvonne?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Okay.
you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Good night.
Good night. Okay. I guess Maria is last, right?
Yep, I'm over there now.
Anything you want to say about Maria, Catherine?
No, Maria, we met. She was great. She went over all the information in detail and gave me a good sense of what goes on here. And she can, better than I, tell us what's happening here.
Thank you, and thank you for having me tonight. My budget is also relatively simple. I didn't want to adjust anything and break it because it's my first year. So everything is remaining the same. We've made some small changes in how we approach things, but the dollar amount remains the same. So my department is made up of myself and an administrative assistant who is part-time. She works 18 hours a week. And there was, I know, Deb, we talked about the salary line. And I was trying to figure out how it's allocated. Part of the fiscal year 24 salary still had Sarah, my predecessor's salary, and the previous administrative assistant. So there's been some turnover. So what we're requesting for salary for fiscal year 25, it's $126,000 with $22. That includes my administrative assistant going up to step 3 in fiscal year 25. And that is, of course, not an increase. That is just what was estimated by the town accountant according to contract. Then for my operational budget, I have pretty standard lines. I have an advertising budget of $1,500. Sometimes applicants don't always pay for advertising in the newspaper. We've been trying to enforce it with the building commissioner to try to save the town money. If you do not pay for your zoning or planning advertisement fee, then we will not issue a building permit. So there is a strong incentive there to pay and pay in time. So that has been working out great for us, but we still need a budget of our own if we ever do any town-owned land that needs advertising in the newspaper. So it's important for us to have a budget for that. Any in like self-initiated projects as well. We created a new utility telephone budget because apparently our phone bill was being paid by our mailing budget line for some reason. So that's a new budget line. That's why there's nothing spent out of fiscal year 24. And I just use the numbers that we've been, exactly what we pay in a year from our Verizon bills. That's what you see there. Dues and membership, we had 1,000 last year. I'm keeping it at 1,000. I'm trying to attend as many conferences as I can. I think it's very important to stay in contact with the region because you never know what's out there. And it's as we talked today about regionalization, I like to explore other options, see what other towns are doing. So I try to be a part of as many organizations as I can. Then our training and education budget and our meetings and conferences budget was merged into one that is simply called professional development. That's why there is some differences between fiscal year 24 and 25. Again, the dollar amount has not changed. It's just trying to streamline budget lines, make them as easy to use as possible. And for professional development, certificates, any classes that I can find. I'm currently doing my master's degree, but if I find time for a class, I will take it. So it's always nice to have the money and keep expanding my horizons. And same goes for my administrative assistant. Then we have a professional services budget of $1,500. This gets used differently as time goes on, but as of fiscal year 24, I've actually really been using it. We had some maps from 20 years ago that were barely legible. So I had those digitized this year for the Historic District Commission. So I'm trying to bring the department up to date and have everything as modern as possible. It's easy to use, transparent, accessible. So I'm hoping to be using professional services and keep updating things as I go. We have a planning consultant budget of $6,000. This can include engineers, lawyers, attorneys, or anything that might be needed. This will change depending on the project. So it's good to have some flexibility. And as we know, engineers and attorneys are incredibly expensive. So it's nice to be able to rely on legal counsel or expert help when there is a controversial development to make sure that we are taking educated decisions. We have a printing, postage, and stationery budget that is not changing. Office supplies remain the same at 180, and we do not have any encumbrances. So that is basically what I have for operating. I do have some future ideas for where I want the department to go that will kind of affect how much my department spends, but I want to stop here and ask if there's any questions so far.
Questions? I don't see any, Maria.
But Maria, had the opportunity to meet you at the session on the MTA. So two comments really. One is, being it's your first time before the committee, maybe you give a little background on yourself, and because it's great to see you here with us in the town, and then maybe a little update on where that process is. Because I know you had the consultants from the at the session, the community session. So those are two. A little more about yourself and how we benefited from you coming to us here.
Of course. So I have been with the town of Medfield now for about 8 months. Before joining Medfield, I worked for the town of Norton. I was their director of planning and economic development. Before that, I worked for the town of Sharon, so I'm very familiar with the region. I was with Sharon for about 2 years, and Sharon doesn't have a town planner. The closest position they have is planning and engineering specialist, which is what I was. So I got to learn a lot of engineering concepts, which have been incredibly helpful. My educational background is I have a undergraduate in political science, and I have a minor in geographic information systems. So for me, data management is incredibly necessary, especially in land use, to be taking decisions that are, like I said, informed and accurate. And I have found a lot of the department is a little bit behind on our data collection, how we use data. So I've been trying to prioritize that. I'm currently going to school for public administration. I'm going to Suffolk University at night. I'm starting classes again on Thursday, which will be madness. But I do not love the commute. But my goal is, to keep learning as much as I can. I hope to be town administrator one day. So I'm interested in everything and anything that I can learn about the town, about every single department. So this meeting has been amazing. I've learned so much. So I guess that's a little bit about myself. So anything I can learn, I will learn, and everything is helpful. And I think my department deals with a lot of very interesting stuff. I oversee the planning board, the zoning board, the Conservation Commission, and the Affordable Housing Trust. So that's a wide variety of topics and things that come up. So to segue into your question on the MBTA zoning, for those of you that are not fully aware, the state has mandated MBTA communities, which is 177 towns around the Boston metro area that either have an MBTA station or are adjacent to one, to have a district of reasonable size. That means at least 50 acres in which you allow multifamily zoning by right. That is, it's not a building mandate. You just need to theoretically allow in your bylaws for multifamily zoning. So we're working with a consultant. It's Ines Associates and RKG Associates. Sarah, my predecessor, had gotten a grant, so she started looking at sites for those multifamily districts. And then in this year, I got another grant for $70,000 to continue the work. The stages that we're currently in is we held a public workshop in which we invited residents and planning board, select board, and Affordable Housing Trust members to give us their opinion on where they think the density should be. We had a Lego exercise in which we had a map of town and asked people, where would you like to see this density and how dense would you like to see the town hypothetically built? So the next steps we go from here is, now that we have some public feedback, the planning board is going to be discussing this with our consultant on January 22nd is our next planning board meeting. I invite you all to attend if you're interested in hearing where we're at with it. Then in February, we're going to start having joint planning board and select board meetings, because even though it will be a planning board article to do a zoning bylaw change, we do need the select board's approval and support, and same as the Warrant Committee. So I'm hoping to keep updating you as we go before we do a full presentation to you in April with the actual bylaw that has been agreed upon by the planning board and the select board. So it'll be.
I was gonna say, I spoke with Maria about this briefly, and it's such a complicated topic that I think it's a good idea if she comes before us as sort of she does a little bit of what we've done at that workshop just for us before we get the final solution in April. So sometime in March, she's agreed to come back to visit us and give us a little educational on this, because it's a big article. You might have read the Boston Globe over the weekend. Milton, has had some tough times with it, and so it's very controversial in some communities. So anyway, we'll have more to dive into the MBTA zoning later on. But you mentioned briefly that there were some things in the future that you wanted to talk about.
Correct. So my main objectives for this year is something that Sarah thankfully had gotten a grant before she left. She had $80,000 from the Community Compact IT grant for Laserfish, which is a document management system. And also there's money set aside for scanning. So we have documents dating back from 1950s from the old subdivisions that need to be digitized. Not everything I have is scanned, and some things require me to go to storage, and it can be a little time consuming. And then it's very difficult to scan any large size plans, and there's not really a organized management, like data management system. So the grant that Sarah had gotten, which we're implementing now, is I actually have a meeting with the scanning company tomorrow. We're going to be shipping out, it was hundreds of boxes. I think it was at least 20 years worth of data is going to be the first shipment. So we hope to digitize everything pre-2000. That's our first goal. So most of the things of the past 20 years I have digitized, but we're going to be sending documents to a scanning company. They're going to scan them, index them, and then put them on a database management system so that when I need to find a file, I pull up an address. And the end goal is to start with my department, then bring in conservation, and then bring in building and fire, and make it a comprehensive database for everyone that residents will be able to access. So when I have a resident that's like, I'm new to town, I bought this house, what can you tell me about it? Sometimes it's very difficult for me to see if there was ever a zoning decision passed on it, if it was, over 20 years old. My goal is to be able to type in an address and have all the PDFs pulled up that I can just share with the resident, or have the residents do it themselves so they understand the properties and they can find their own data without depending on us. So this is Laserfish is the name of the management system. It's incredibly secure. It encrypts data. I can edit too if I have documents that only I can see that have sensitive information. I can redact them, and the only public copy is going to be the redacted one, but I can see the original document. So there's a lot of really wonderful provisions. And another great thing is it has text recognition. So if I need to find something related to water for a certain subdivision, that could take me a couple hours. For subdivision files are huge. Sometimes they can be multiple boxes. But if I have a software that can scan for those words, then it can recognize the text for me and help me find it. So I expect it's going to save a lot of staff time, and it's going to create a better experience for customers and prospective applicants, developers. And I think it's going to increase transparency if everyone can see what files we have. Also be amazing for public records requests, because we can just show them how to use it and they can find the documents. So the grant is going to cover $60,000 worth of scanning. We don't know quite how much that's going to cover, simply because we estimated the number of documents depending on the size of the box. It's not a very exact science estimating how much is in each box, but basically they're going to be using up as much as they can. And then I'm going to keep requesting money for more scanning through this grant as the years go on. It's also going to cover year one of our setup fees for Laserfish, but subsequent years are going to come out of probably the IT budget. And I know that I have discussed this with the Warrant Committee along with their IT director and Brittany Franklin. We're looking at a $5,000 to $6,000 increase a year for the software. So it's actually very cheap for the amount of service improvement that's going to be and how much time it's going to save staff. So that is, like I said, it's mostly my department right now, and I hope to bring in conservation and building as the years go on. But I want to put it in your radar that if IT budget goes up, that's my fault. I think it's a right good cause.
Well, that's great. Thank you for bringing us into the 21st century.
I'm sorry, just, I'm not sure I want to work with someone to organize.
We are looking too for coming years, and this is going to come up next year. I also want to put it on your radar. Every time I worked before has had a permitting system. We used to have OpenGov in Sharon, and Norton was transitioning into it as I was leaving. But it's a system that can allow you to do your applications online. And when you apply, it's like, I want to build a single family home. It'll be hopefully fully integrated with a mapping system, so it can tell you what zoning district you're on and what other permits you trigger based on your location. If you're close to wetlands, then you might be flagged that you need to talk to the conservation agent because you will need notice of intent or an RDA. If you are in an aquifer district, then you will need a Board of Health review. And we can set it up fully customized so each department head can have their own forms, because I know what my department needs and Board of Health knows what they need. So we have full control over this, and then we can set up a workflow so that my permits have to come first before a building permit can be issued, but my permits can be done at the same time as Board of Health. So we're going to set up a timeline so applicants know exactly what they need and when they need it, because you wouldn't believe the amount of ping-ponging we have to do. Someone comes up to me, it's like, what about this address? Like, they just came to me. I was like, oh, I saw them 3 months ago. I hadn't realized that they might not have continued at the rate that I thought they were going to continue their project. So I think this is going to help keep us all on the same page. We're looking at DPW, fire, water, sewer, planning, zoning, conservation to go on it. This will be great because a lot of times applicants don't fill out applications correctly and they're handwritten. And I can't tell you the shock when someone handed me a handwritten application for the first time, like, what is this? And they're like, this is a special, I was like, no, it's not. You can't. Everyone has had very nice handwriting so far, but I am terrified for the day it doesn't happen. So yes, I'm just trying to create more transparency and more sense of flow and direction, because a lot of times it takes us calling each other and keeping track of where projects are. And I think it would be so much easier if we could all log in, see all the documents that were submitted, have access to everything, and be able to communicate more efficiently. Again, I think this will save a lot of staff time. And we're hoping to cut out a permitting system that comes from the building department. They have a permitting system that they're not happy with. So we will be cutting that out and bringing in OpenGov hopefully next year. We do have a quote. The first year, I believe, was around 80,000, just because there is some setup fees. There has to be training so we can then set up the forms that we want. And then from then ongoing years, the cost is going to be 60,000, and that's spread out over 6 different departments, but will most likely be reflected on the IT budget just to centralize. So I think per department, maybe like a $10,000 increase if you want to look at it that way. But this OpenGov fully integrates with Laserfish. So after a permit is closed, we can give it like 2 years, and then it'll automatically save itself to my database system. So all the old permits will actually be seamlessly integrated, so we can keep up the database without having, when things are automated, things don't get dropped. So we're trying to create systems of accountability. And we're hoping that if we look at our mapping system, it'll also be integrated with that and with the assessor software. So we're trying to bring everything up to date. It's a large process. I know it's a large investment, but I think it'll do wonders for how developers and even residents experience the town. So that is to come, but those are future projects and future expenses that will come up.
Okay.
Operational cost will be against that.
Okay. So Frank says we have this in the capital budget.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then the ongoing operational costs won't be an FY 26 item, so.
26, yes.
Thank you that was a very thorough,
Yes.
you know,
Thank you.
exciting presentation. Appreciate that.
Welcome.
Welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome
Thanks,
to.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys again in March.
Oh, yes, yes.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. So we are through all the departments now, for tonight. And the next agenda item is a discussion of the current status of the school and town budget guidance and where we stand on that. Frank, did you hand that out to everybody? That's for me.
There's a few more up here, so I can get about.
Peter, why don't you just roll through the.
Yeah, it's supposed to pass them down.
All right.
And Frank, you might want to go through, but I'll just give a brief. So Frank will take us through very quickly, I think, just the changes, but just so people understand where things are at. If you remember, we gave some guidance to the schools and to the town to be around 4.1 for the schools and 4.2 increase over prior year 24's budget. And the town has, come very close to that. There's some very minor changes that they're looking to make, but you'll see everything that they've given us will roll up to a number that's close to what that guidance is. It's not going to be exact, but it's going to be very close. There's some tweaks that they want to make. And the school, I think, is probably a little bit behind the town in terms of where they're at. They are, they sort of did their first pass, sort of their budget 101, and they're exceeding the guidance that we do. They're at like a 6%.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly large gap on the school side, and it's driven by a big component of it is special ed related. So they're working through how to solve that problem of special ed. It's a problem that a lot of school districts are having this year across the Commonwealth. And we'll have more conversations about what they're thinking of doing in that regard. But they're hoping to get to, I think at the last school committee meeting, Jeff said that they're hoping to get closer to the budget guidance that we provided. They're just a little slower getting through their process than the town is. So might take some time for them to get there. But anyway, I'll turn it over to you. If you anything you want to talk about in here?
I guess just briefly, to cover the spreadsheet, we, earlier in the budget process had covered, I guess all of the revenues and sort of the logic behind predicting some of those revenue, figures for fiscal 25. And then a lot of the expenditures, towards the bottom of the first page and the first half of the second page, the first half of the second page. Those are costs that are, I think you term them as sort of like shared costs between both town and school departments. So you'll see things in there like employee benefits, insurance for town buildings, debt service. And so the thought process this year was, let's take all of the revenue, we'll take all the shared expenditures, and then we'll split up the revenues after that. And so this is what we gave to the select board tonight, this initial budget worksheet. As Steve mentioned, the town departments, if you look towards the sort of bottom half of the third page, the total town budget increase is $562,069 as of right now. There are a few variables, like Steve said, that we're still trying to iron out. In addition to some of the increases that the department heads who attended tonight's meeting mentioned, we sort of talked a little bit about a COLA increase that towards the end of the budget process that would be distributed to all the departments and their line items. But right now, human resources line item will see a $152,000 increase, just south of $153,000. Right now, we're budgeting for a 3% COLA, cost of living adjustment for all non-union personnel. And then on the Parks and Recreation line item, you will see a $46,520 increase. Most of that for a new assistant director that is funded to start on January 1st, 2025, right? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And
But that's a half a year.
so that'll be half a year. We'll have to fully fund that in 26. But those, and again, in addition to some of the bigger increases that were discussed by the police chief, DPW director, and fire chief this evening, those two additional costs will be the primary drivers. Some of the additional variables, as Steve mentioned, the school public hearing for their budget will be on January 25th. We have a meeting of the public, or excuse me, what does PEC stand for? I can't remember. Public Employee. Our health. Yeah, our healthcare negotiations are ongoing. So there could be additional savings we hope achieved there after those negotiations are complete. So hopefully after tomorrow we'd have additional information on those. On the town side, we also have an ongoing classic compensation study that we're hoping to have the final results of in the coming weeks. And then also you'll notice some of the lines are blank. So on the first page, you'll see free cash to capital stabilization, free cash to general stabilization, free cash to monetary articles. Those are blank right now, just because I don't think there's been any finalized proposals for those line items just quite yet. So we didn't want to overpromise or underpromise or put words in anyone's mouth. So those are blank for now. We could be looking at some additional costs for grounds maintenance for some of the town buildings. And those should be all the smaller things that I think we should be able to iron out.
Sure. Any questions for Frank?
Yeah.
I mean, so obviously the big gap here is the schools that we can continue to work on it.
And then so usually how we did it last year was if we have any updates to the spreadsheet, we would just bring the updates to the meetings and
and then maybe highlight them.
Yeah, we can talk about the updates on it.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if this is a question for Frank or a question for you, or. I thought we were discussing, you made a presentation about it, using free cash to fund a trust fund or whatever we want to call it, for sort of a down payment on a new elementary school.
Yeah.
So are we going to have enough money to put money into capital stabilization, general stabilization, and then additional free cash to put some money into that? Or will we have to reduce some of these, or is that just unknowable at that time?
I guess the new wrinkle to what we talked about, remember we had a plan on how we were going to use that free cash, right?
Right.
Then I think at that point we said maybe $1 million into this tax mitigation stabilization fund.
Right.
So there's some things that the school is working through on special education that might require the creation of another reserve fund.
Okay.
Where it will be funded with some free cash.
Okay.
So some of the allocations of free cash would change, but nothing's gonna go away.
Okay.
You know, so we may tweak where, how much money, we put in each bucket.
And just, so those funds don't come out of the operations. Those are out of the current free cash that was generated at the end of last year. So, right? So
Yeah, it's not part of
It's not part of the
operating budget.
operating.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. Okay, anything else with Frank? All right, thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Oh, you might want to stay up there, because we've got the warrant article list.
Okay.
Did you give this to everybody,
It was,
or was it email?
I thought it was email, but if not,
Does everybody have the warrant article list? Okay,
I can pull it out and put it on screen.
okay, he'll put it up on the screen, that's a good idea, I can just walk through it.
Sorry about that.
So that everybody know the warrant closed last week, and so what he's gonna go through is a listing of what the articles are. And just briefly walk through, we're not gonna go into a deep discussion on any of these items, other than to just tell you what's on the warrant. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it. Just some quick second.
Yeah,
Probably at the end, right?
I thought it was, but,
There it is.
there it is. Yeah, okay. So some of these ones that are, towards the top are pretty run of the mill, standard operating business. Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, the HR articles are very standard every year. The financial articles. There's an article to. You want to talk about this?
Sure. So last year at town meeting, we created a opioid stabilization fund to receive funds that resulted from a legal settlement between the Commonwealth and opioid manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, folks like that. Because that was the mechanism that the state suggested we set up. Because these funds are to be used for specific purposes, not for anything that we want to spend them on. The state has since changed the law to allow us to, we still have to spend them in specific ways, but we don't need to put them in a stabilization fund, which can be a little bit cumbersome. We have to wait for town meeting to spend out of a stabilization fund. So it just.
But this was my article last year.
It was.
The opioids.
Don't take it personally.
I think someone's dissing me here. We set it up and then we take it right down. It's like, so much for you.
So this.
It's not true.
So this one's sort of technical in nature.
It's only fair that it should be your article.
Yeah, I know. Check it into the dustbin of history.
Never mind.
For the EV chart, we have EV chargers at the town hall now. And so in order to pay the electric bill associated with those bills, or with those charging stations, We're gonna set up a revolving fund, or we'd like to set up a revolving fund that would allow the revenue collected to go right into the revolving fund so that we can just pay for those bills right out of the revolving fund as opposed to paying for them out of the operating budget.
We're gonna start putting those EV charges in like the town parking lot.
We have, we have two at the town, on the parking lot, not right behind the townhouse, but the one that's sort of across the street on James Ave.
You know, the Avenue Restaurant is?
Yeah.
Right
Oh, yeah.
behind it. EV charges.
And those are town owned, yeah.
So we have the Green Communities grant that Amy mentioned. We actually got a grant to put those in.
So they have to track all those, you know.
Yeah, we actually have, there's 4 or 2 at the schools. There's two different schools that had at least one. So they have them at school properties, and we have one at we have 2 at the townhouse.
They're not high-speed chargers, I think, they're trickle chargers.
You know, I'm not actually sure, to be quite honest. I don't believe that they
were
are.
high speed, there'd probably be a long line.
Yeah, I don't believe that they're high speed now. And I don't know if the ones at the Bank of America are high speed either.
Those are high-speed.
Those are, okay. We did a lot of. The next 2, creating a revolving fund for the Council on Aging. So they have a couple of different accounts that they use for programmatic spending. So we're looking at creating a revolving fund for them so they can do that properly. Creation of a revolving fund account for license to carry fees. So how that works is Medfield collects, call it, I don't know the exact figure, but call it $100 for an LTC application. We then have to pay the state 75 of those dollars about, and we keep 25 for the administrative costs. So instead of sort of budgeting for things, budgeting for those expenditures in the operating budget, it's just kind of easier to take in the money and pay it out of the same account to the state. The revolving fund expenditure limit authorization is what we do every year for every single revolving fund that basically sets the amount of money that can be spent out of a revolving fund. Cemetery perpetual care, the local PEG access, those are ones we do every year for, we take the money that we receive from, I think it's Verizon primarily, and transfer that to Medfield TV. Cemetery perpetual care will be for accepting lot purchases that folks have made in the past fiscal year. Create a Route 27/Dale Street traffic mitigation special revenue account. So we actually had funds that we received from the developer on the development of the corner of 27 and Dale Street. And so to do any work related to, like, if there were streetlights that needed to be put in or sidewalk improvements, things like that, that money ended up closing into free cash. There are still some improvements that need to be made. So we need to basically take that money out of free cash and put it into this special revenue account. Create a special education stabilization fund / reserve account. I think Steve mentioned that one a little bit ago. Same with the elementary school tax mitigation stabilization fund. Create the school department Medfield State Hospital mitigation special revenue fund. So in the agreement with Trinity for the sale of the state hospital campus, there is a $1 million mitigation payment that they'll be making to the schools. If we don't set up a special account for it, that money will just go to free cash per Mass General Law. So we're setting up a special fund to receive that $1 million.
We don't want to put it in the elementary school tax mitigation stabilization fund? Or just because it's too limiting, or?
No, I think it has to be held in its own. Oh, no, this is a difference. It's not land proceeds, right? This is.
Right, yeah, mitigation payments are.
I think the difference is that it specifically requires that the school department have to just say how it's used. Even though in my memo, I said that it will eventually go towards the school. They have to, has to go through a process where they have to sign off on it, because that's how it was set up in terms of.
The next 1, 2, 3, 4 are all capital budget items, whether for municipal buildings or non-building projects. Elementary school feasibility study funding. So last year, I believe we appropriated, is it 500 or 250? I can't remember. I think we appropriated 500.
250.
It was 250
already.
Oh, that's right. The total of 500. So this year we could potentially do something like that again. Prior year bills is what we have on there every year. If for some reason we don't get a bill for a
Don't
service.
we have a feasibility study already?
I'm sorry?
Don't we already have a feasibility study?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about the prior year bills.
Yeah. We have a feasibility study for a building that
Never came into
isn't gonna get built. You have to do a feasibility study for a new proposal. The architects have to design a building, have to figure out how much it's gonna cost and all that stuff. I mean, if they put the same building out for another vote, I guess, we still have to re-estimate the cost of it. Yeah.
Prior year bills received for a prior fiscal year by the town will require approval by town meeting. So that one's one we have on there every year. The next two are all operating budgets, both for the general fund and the enterprise funds. Rescind bond authorization for the Mount Nebo Water Tower painting project. We did one of these last year, sort of like a housekeeping thing. We have extra debt that we have authorized to issue. We never issued it, so we can just remove that authorization to borrow. The appropriation to the 375th anniversary trust fund. I believe that would be seed money for preparing for that celebration. Appropriation to economic vitality fund. I believe this is one that the town does every once in a while to replenish that fund that pays for things like the holiday stroll, for instance. So all the traffic barriers, the lights, all that type of stuff. And then these two here were requests by the Conservation Commission. They're not entirely sure if they're going to use one or either of these or both. An appropriation for a pond survey. My understanding that's to look at all the town's ponds and see what maintenance or work is needed to keep them in good shape. Excuse me. And then an appropriation for Conservation Commission property signage. That one I think is pretty self-explanatory. General articles. The select board had discussed potentially changing or proposing to change the town moderator's term from 1 year to 3 years. Zoning enforcement fees.
Happen or the sponsors blank?
So that one is the select board. I'm sorry.
You just have to build it out.
Yeah.
But they were.
Every article has that response.
Zoning enforcement fees. I believe town council thought that we might need some updates on that one. I may need to follow up on that, on the specifics of that one. The dog bylaw. That was a charge that the select board had for the dog control bylaw committee. So there's a placeholder for what their proposal might be. Authorize the select board name change in town bylaws. So last year the town changed the name of the board of selectmen to the select board. That change has to be reflected in the town bylaws. So again, that's kind of a small housekeeping thing. Medfield State Hospital Redevelopment Authority. That was a placeholder put on in case there was a need for the actual redevelopment work done at the campus. In order to help with the procurement, it may be helpful to set up what's known as a redevelopment authority for this type of project. Again, not sure if that's going to go forward or not, but it was a placeholder put on given that the warrant was closing. MBTA Community Zoning District. Maria discussed a little bit about that one, and she'll be back in March to provide more detail on that. The sale of property article is a citizen's petition, the only citizen petition we have for the sale of the the Medfield State Hospital Chapel to Belforge. Right now, they're under a 99-year lease, but they've submitted a citizen petition to have the town sell to them.
By the way, we received that actual citizen petition in the Warrant Committee email. They did take the time to fill out our questionnaire. Everybody remembers the questionnaire we developed last year. And so I will be sending that out this week to everybody. But we won't spend any time talking about it until March, and we'll have Jean come in, if she can, educate us on what that particular article is all about.
And then free cash is a placeholder for, it's always the last article in case there's anything that comes up that anything else we have to use free cash for.
So that's it. Only one citizen petition this year. All right. Update on the school building committee. Peter, you give us a little update then?
Yeah, I've only attended one meeting. That was on January 3, I think. They have a meeting the first Wednesday of each month. We're actually having a Zoom meeting tomorrow to vote on a proposal to send out a request for proposal to do a demographic study to see what they project the likely census would be in a future Dale Street school, and get a sense of how many students, so get a sense of how big a school you're gonna need. They did one of these for the last one. There was some back and forth at the meeting about whether we needed to do a new one, but the consensus of the school building committee was we should get up-to-date data to submit. The reason, or not the only reason, but the principal reason for that is the big debate is, I think the committee was quite surprised that we did not make it under the Mass School Building Authority's latest funding thing. They had a meeting, I guess, a couple months ago before December, let's call it September or October, where the vibes were described as very positive. Someone at the one meeting I've attended said that Dale Street is considered, among the top 5 or 10 of the worst sort of physical buildings in the state. And so it seemed like a good candidate to be considered for funding. We in the committee inferred that the MSBA was upset at us for voting down the last proposal. And so they wanted to give other towns a shot. And I think the big issue that the school building committee will face in coming months is, so we reach a sort of fork in the road. Do we prepare another application to seek to go before the MSBA and wait till December to see if we could get funding through that mechanism? Or do we decide to go 100% through town funding of the project? It's not an easy decision at all. I don't think there's a consensus yet on the committee on which way to go. We stood to get potentially $19 million or so from the state. That's a lot of money to not pick up.
It's actually 23 now.
23, okay. So I'm spending a lot of time talking and not saying very much. There are some big decisions coming down the pike, but nothing much to report right now. Ed's looking at me with incredible.
I'd be incredulous. I think they would think it'd be a better idea to do it ourselves and just forego $23 million. It just blows my mind in a town that was so worried about costs and the tax bill.
Yeah.
We would say, oh, it's okay. We'll worry about you know, 500, 200,000 a year, but we're willing to give up 23 million. It's just.
Didn't we already make that decision? I mean, that was made. Wasn't that made last year?
What decision?
The decision to forego.
No,
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 he
we
said,
had an
like-
application in place to try to
yeah,
get.
they applied last year
Yeah.
and they didn't get in.
Right.
So the question is, you have to make a decision every year whether you want to
No, there
reapply.
was a reapply though. I thought the first one,
The first one failed at town meeting.
right, exactly,
Then after that failed vote, they
Right.
reapplied.
right.
And that, they just heard in December
Right, I
that
understand.
they didn't get in.
Yeah.
So now the question is, what, do they want to reapply for a second? You know, you keep reapplying until
But
they.
it's not a foregone conclusion that they would reapply.
No, it's not.
No,
But that's
no,
But
it's
that's
not.
the point, is
point.
there's no way
But
to
why
tell them to
wouldn't you?
approve a school without.
Because the alternative is to do it
Well-
all yourself.
Well, the
But
trouble
they haven't
is,
made a decision to, there has not been a decision made to not apply.
Right, exactly.
Right.
I mean, the trouble is, to your point, Ed. I agree with you. How could you possibly not want $23 million? Trouble is, so you wait till December, you do the application, you apply. Every year, there's, I don't know how many school districts apply and how many get funded, but it's sure ain't 100%. The point being, there's no guarantee that this coming December 2024, we
Right.
get funded.
Right.
So then you've lost another whole year of not much forward, not a ton of forward movement. And you're no closer to a decision on Dale Street. That said, your point about how can you possibly forego the possibility of getting $23 million is a big one. So I don't know how the school building committee is gonna come out on that.
I think eventually that we would be approved. I think, maybe we didn't get approved this year because it was retribution or some other reason why we didn't. But if we were on that top 5 list as the worst schools in the state last year, we didn't drop off that list and move down to the 30th. We're still up there is what, in fact, maybe we'll move from number 5 to number 1. But eventually, I think, my guess would be that we'd get approved in the next year or two.
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, keep in mind, it was clearly communicated at the time of the vote that it would be a 3-year wait before you got back into the MSBA. And this would be the 3rd year. In other words, it was clearly understood at the time of the last vote that it would take 3 years to get back in. That was communicated, so. Okay.
And there are people in town who do not support an MSBA project.
Right.
So, you know, I think one of the things is, because we're having a conversation with the representative on that, if we don't, given the town's financial position, I would agree with you, Ed, that we couldn't build a school without MSBA. So if the decision of the committee is not to go for the MSBA, then the decision would be an alternative to building a school. In that consideration, because I mean, if it's an $85 million school on our own,
Oh, it's not defined. I mean, it's not defined.
Pardon me?
It's not defined at this time. We don't know that.
Well, I'm just saying, all right, I mean, that's just my opinion, that we couldn't build an $85 million school on our own.
Well, based on the numbers that I ran, you know, in the spring, it would be an average tax increase of $1,200. Okay, without if we decide not to use MSBA.
Right.
So the question is that, are people willing to pay that?
Well,
That's the question. Yeah, well, how much money are people willing to, you know, pony up in their average tax bill? Now, that's for $800,000 average home, so. And, you know, if you go with MSBA, it's actually $400 cheaper.
Right.
So that's the delta we're talking about in terms of real numbers.
Mhm.
People want to make, I mean, that's the impact to people's tax bill.
Well,
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, you sound like you
Well,
wouldn't have a problem.
I think it's interesting though, that they're gonna go ahead and redo the projections on the students, because there seemed to be a very big gap between what were the original plan for how many students they need and the current enrollment is like a big delta. So the numbers that we're talking about, you know, how much this would cost are based on projections that are not right. It's like off by like 20%, right? That's what I read.
I don't know the old data.
Well, what I had read was that they were projecting that the school population would be at a certain place. And then the latest data is nowhere near that.
That's correct. And there's a presentation that I think I sent to you that I did
Maybe.
showed the difference in cost
Right.
between the different enrollments.
Yeah.
So if you cut out, it's not as big as people thought it would be.
Right.
That's the point. It's not, if you go from 500 to 450 or from 575 to 500, you're cutting out an extra 4 classrooms. So it's the square foot cost of, you know, those 4 classrooms. So,
It's not that significant. And to your point earlier, you can look at the current, I mean, you can look at the current enrollment, which may be small, but remember, it's the 50-year school. So you have to build in additional people over 50 years. So you just can't go by the current, what's coming down the pike.
Well, that's what they're gonna do the analysis on, right?
Right, we want to get a sense of what some demographer, I believe it's mostly demographics, thinks where they think. And I think the time frame in the request for proposal is 15 years, where school enrollment will go over the next 15 years.
which I think is a good idea that they're doing.
It'd be interesting to see how close it comes to NASDAQ, because NASDAQ does that.
Right.
And then I think, on the question of, you know, whether they reapply to MSBA, I know they're struggling with that. I agree with these two gentlemen here that I view the last vote as heavily influenced by 2 things, the location and cost.
Yeah.
And the cost thing has just gotten worse.
Why?
And way worse without MSBA. So I don't see a solution that says we just leave MSBA out of the process. And that's going to get 67%. Matter of fact, I think you create a new no vote because you didn't go to the MSBA.
Right.
There's going to be a whole group of people in town that will say,
But as the
you didn't go get that $23 million. I'm not voting for this.
But as the Sicilian on this committee, my fear, unlike Ed's, I think, is we go back to the MSBA and they say no again. Because I don't know that. No one can know that. I just tend to
I understand
be
that.
superstitious and believe what can go wrong will.
Yeah.
And so then you've lost another whole year.
That's right. But this thing's not gonna get built for 5 years.
Right.
You're not gonna occupy this building for 5 years.
What is the reason not to apply other than fearing rejection? I don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, beyond the delay though, the MSBA, their requirements are driving the costs. So it's a circular reference. People believe that the requirements of the MSBA is why they wound up on proposing the other site in the first place. Because they wanted a greenfield because it was required by the MSBA.
Oh,
So there's
okay,
an
thank
argument
you.
that
Peter, can I interrupt you for a second? Because I will probably maybe disagree with that comment. I think that the site selection, the MSBA had no role. That was a decision made by the select board and the school building committee. They picked the site selection. And the MSBA just asked questions in their reviews. They don't impose a requirement to go to WeLock. That's not the MSBA's requirement. That's our decision as a town.
But I understood they did not want to sort of tear down the old Dale, the current Dale, and build in its place.
They being.
The MSBA was requiring a green field, whether it's up at Wheelock.
No. If you look at the proposals that were submitted for evaluation, there was an ad rental project at Dale Street.
I saw that, yeah.
So that was building on to the existing, renovating the existing building and adding to it at Dale Street. And there were a couple configurations of that.
Yes.
There was a new construction at Dale Street. There was a new construction at Wheelock. So there were like
That's
five or six different available options that the select board and the school building committee evaluated and decided which one to pick.
And that's why I asked earlier, why are we doing another architectural study? If we have 5 options.
It's a new study. It's brand new. The glass is gone. If you're starting with the.
We had,
They voted it down.
You're starting with the plain piece of paper.
Right. Okay.
And I agree, yeah,
And-
the sites haven't changed.
And they want to change the enrollment, so you have a different building, right? You have a different building, it's not the same building. So, but still gonna have a cafeteria, still gonna have a gym, still gonna have all the common space. So, I mean, but it's not right to say that the MSBA required that site selection, that's not right. Okay.
Anyway, so I didn't mean for this to turn into as long a discussion as it did. Anyway, the school building committee has some decisions coming down the pike. And we're voting tomorrow. I think that'll be a quick meeting to discuss, just putting out this RFP on demography, on likely census for the school. And then we'll meet again at the beginning of the first Wednesday in February and go through that.
I would add that over the next 5 years, being that this Warrant Committee representative, I don't presume that I'll even be on this table, is representing and voting that this kind of conversation will continue. I mean, you say, I apologize for giving something, no, I think every update will create discussion.
Okay.
No,
Maybe we
this is
can
good for you.
move it up in the agenda. But,
Yeah.
or not. maybe later.
Well, we had a partnership.
No, I know.
I mean,
Thanks.
I guess my only question, are they still doing public comment in these meetings? Is that still an opportunity for the public to go to those meetings?
Meetings are open. They're broadcast. We've been getting complaints, although they take place in this room. We've been getting complaints. I've seen one complaint that it's very hard to hear what's said at the school building committee meetings, and they want us to improve the microphone system. But they're certainly public. All the documents are posted on the school building committee website. I will say that I don't even remember now what it was, but something came up at the last meeting, and the chairperson said, I don't think we should go that way. I think the most important thing we need to maintain is a sense of transparency here. And I think that we really need to be as transparent as humanly possible, which I thought was great. So I think they're keenly aware of the need for transparency.
All right.
Well, it just felt like that would be a pretty big decision they want to have folks weighing on from the community, right? On whether or not to reapply or go about it, yeah.
Right.
Well, we had talked about how we were gonna have, maybe you represent the views of the Warrant Committee on that board. And so if we have a majority view that, we wanna have some type of MSBA, maybe we should give that guidance, whether or not this time or in the future, but maybe we should find a way to come to some consensus on, if we have very strong point of view that, gosh darn it, we need to have that, then we should communicate that.
Well, maybe at our next meeting, we'll put that on the agenda and talk about it. How's that?
Yeah.
I mean, this is getting it's getting pretty late tonight.
I'm ready for motion.
But I agree that we could put that on the agenda.
Just to further the conversation, right?
Yeah. All right, very good. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All right, meeting is adjourned.